Chapter 686. Since they did not encounter any danger, it was likely that they had not reached the critical areas of this ancient battlefield. Xiaoling Yu did not dare to be careless. Even if he did not want to search for treasures or take risks, he still had to find a way out. In the past, many experts from various races had entered. They must have already cleared the ordinary dangers here. It was fine if they did not encounter any danger here, but if they did, it would be very difficult to deal with. Perhaps it was because they were in the spatial turbulence, and the entire space was far smaller than the divine realm. The spatial pressure here was far greater than the divine realm's space. Not only did it slow down the speed of the cultivators, but it also greatly restricted everyone's divine senses. After a few more months, Xiaoling Yu still did not encounter any danger. He also did not see any natural treasures on this land. He could not even find any flowers or trees. The entire land was a desert. There was a desolate and ancient aura everywhere, making people feel depressed. There were more than 100 million cultivators from the two alien races who had entered this place. Even though this place was not small, they still met often. In the beginning, the cultivators from the two races were still able to control themselves and remain calm. However, as time went by, they did not encounter any danger and became more and more relaxed. Now, as long as the cultivators from the two races met, they would kill each other, leaving behind countless corpses on the battlefield. The smell of blood began to spread in this world, making everyone feel even more uneasy. Xiaoling Yu was still fine. He was very strong and had the chaos spectrum to hide. He did not have much of a burden, but he was a little anxious that he could not find a way out. Another half a year passed. Xiaoling Yu arrived in front of a stone forest. Countless tall stone pillars towered into the sky. They were either cylindrical or square pillars. The distance between them was less than 100 feet. They were connected together to form a stone forest. These stone pillars were of different heights. All the stone pillars that could be seen with the naked eye were about 10,000 feet tall, and the lowest was about 1,000 feet tall. The stone forest covered a wide area, with no end in sight. Although they had yet to enter, Xiaoling Yu could already feel the immense pressure. This pressure was formless and formless, but it truly existed. However, ordinary cultivators would not be able to feel it. It seemed like only experts who had reached a certain level of cultivation would be able to feel this pressure. Thus, Xiaoling Yu stood in front of the stone forest for less than an hour before she saw several hundred cultivators below the God Emperor stage charging into the stone forest without any change in expression. The God Emperors and Shin gods who saw this all frowned as they watched from the outside. Xiaoling Yu did not enter the stone forest directly. Instead, she walked around the edge of the stone forest. Along the way, she encountered many foreign race experts, but everyone was looking at the stone forest. This stone forest was obviously a dangerous place. However, treasures were often hidden in dangerous places. Thus, even though everyone knew that this place was dangerous, they were still reluctant to leave. Xiaoling Yu did not have anything to be reluctant about. Right now, he only wanted to leave and had no intention of looking for opportunities. After circling around the stone forest for a period of time, he silently left to see if he could find a way out in other places. Nearly 100 years had passed, and Xiaoling Yu had no choice but to return to the edge of the stone forest. This was because in this ancient battlefield, apart from the endless stone forest, there was nothing else worth looking at, not to mention a way out. If there was a way out, it would definitely be in this stone forest. By now, the experts who had been watching from outside the stone forest had all entered the stone forest. Since those foreign race cultivators dared to enter, Xiaoling Yu naturally did not have too many misgivings. Thus, he braced himself and entered the stone forest. In the beginning, Xiaoling Yu was still able to fly above the stone forest. However, the deeper he went into the stone forest, the more chaotic the space above the stone forest became. Frequently, a wide spatial crack would suddenly appear beside him. Furthermore, these spatial cracks would disappear in a flash. If he was not careful, he would be swallowed by them and fall into the spatial turbulence. Xiaoling Yu had no choice but to descend from the sky and enter the depths of the stone forest from the ground. However, this stone forest had countless stone pillars that were similar in appearance. Furthermore, the entire area was very vast. It was simply a natural maze. Even when flying in the air, it was a little difficult to determine one's direction. When one reached the ground, it was even more difficult to determine where to go. Advancing in the stone forest, he did not encounter any danger. However, he would often encounter the two foreign race cultivators. The foreign race cultivators with slightly higher cultivation would immediately retreat when they saw Xiaoling Yu. However, some cultivators with lower cultivation would attack him. With a wave of his hand, Xiaoling Yu killed a portion of the foreign race cultivators. Then, he knocked out some of them and searched their souls. His expression became more and more serious. From the information obtained from the soul search, he could tell that the foreign race cultivators who attacked him had lost their minds. Their consciousness had already sunk, and they only wanted to kill. The reason these cultivators were like this was probably because they had been trapped here for too long. Thus, they were anxious and uneasy. Furthermore, the layout of the stone forest should be a test of the cultivator's mental state. There would be an invisible force constantly corroding the cultivators' minds, causing them to fall into madness and lose their rationality. The foreign race cultivators with higher cultivation did not attack Xiaoling Yu when they saw him. This was probably because they could withstand the mental state test of the stone forest. Xiaoling Yu continued to search for a way out of the stone forest. As time passed, more and more foreign race cultivators fell into a frenzy. Naturally, the number of attacks Xiaoling Yu suffered increased as well. However, these crazy foreign race cultivators who attacked him in groups of 2s and 3s would not be able to harm Xiaoling Yu at all. However, what surprised Xiaoling Yu was that his mental state fluctuated as well. For some reason, he became impatient and frustrated. One day, 1,000 years after he entered the stone forest, Xiaoling Yu, who could not find a way out, even attacked a stone pillar. Is there a possibility that I will fall into madness too? Even though Xiaoling Yu realized that something was wrong with him, he could not calm himself down. His thoughts became more and more chaotic. It was as if countless mosquitoes and flies were buzzing in his head. Needless to say, the stone pillar looked like it was full of holes from the erosion of time. However, it could withstand a casual attack from Xiaoling Yu without collapsing. In the following period of time, the foreign race cultivators who attacked him were not only weak cultivators. Many godly kings and godly emperors charged at him with bloodshot eyes. They did not consider whether they could deal with the person in front of them. After being injured by Xiaoling Yu's aura, they still charged at him. Xiaoling Yu felt that the situation was too strange. Thus, he hid in the primal chaos spectrum before he lost his mind. Why are your eyes red? Miaoling asked Xiaoling Yu. Xiaoling Yu frowned slightly and said, I'm not too sure either. The stone forest outside is very strange. If it's not an extremely powerful formation, then it's filled with some special things that cause cultivators to lose their minds. Then don't go out first. Stabilize your mind and recover your mental state. We'll talk again after you've recovered, Qing Xian reminded him. Xiaoling Yu nodded. Then, he sat down cross-legged and began to meditate quietly. However, what surprised Xiaoling Yu was that even though he was hiding in the primal chaos spectrum and was no longer affected by the special arrangement of the stone forest, he still found it difficult to calm his mind. Moreover, the anxiety in his heart was getting more and more difficult to suppress. He felt as if there was a volcano that had been accumulating in his body for hundreds of millions of years. It had to erupt. Qing Xian and Miaoing also realized that Xiaoling Yu's eyes were getting redder and redder. There was also an unrecognizable evil aura flowing out of his body. The more it was like this, the more Xiaoling Yu did not dare to go out. Qing Xian and Miaoing also did not dare to let him go. However, after hiding in the primal chaos spectrum for less than 10,000 years, Xiaoling Yu felt that he could no longer maintain his mental clarity. He could fall into madness at any time. In his eyes, scenes of bloody battlefields, mountains of corpses, rivers of blood, and illusions of his friends and family being slaughtered kept appearing. This invisibly caused the killing intent in his soul to surge violently. In his ears, there were constant sounds of war drums, accompanied by a solemn and powerful war song that he had never heard before. It made his blood boil, and his desire to kill was uncontrollable. I can't continue staying in the primal chaos spectrum. If I fall into madness here and attack my friends and family, the losses will outweigh the gains. Even if I go crazy, I have to go crazy outside. Xiaoling Yu took advantage of the strand of clarity he still had. He did not ask Qing Xian and Miaoing and directly rushed out of a light door. Once again, Xiaoling Yu entered the stone forest. He maintained his mental clarity for less than 3 days before he fell into madness. He stayed in the primal chaos spectrum for 10,000 years, but in reality, only a year had passed in the outside world. If he did not enter the primal chaos spectrum, he should not have fallen into madness within a year. At this moment, the saint gods outside did not fall into madness. However, all the god emperors had bloodshot eyes and were killing everywhere. Xiaoling Yu was the same. He had fallen into madness. He would attack any cultivator he saw. Cultivators below the saint god stage could only be insta-killed by him. Many saint gods immediately retreated when they saw him. Since he had lost his mind, he naturally would not search for a way out. He was only venting his killing intent everywhere. The more cultivators he killed, the crazier Xiaoling Yu became. He was bathed in blood and was surrounded by a dense bloody light. The saint gods who had not fallen into madness gradually realized that there was a freakishly powerful expert in the stone forest who was going crazy. They had once organized to kill Xiaoling Yu, but they could only gather 5 or 6 saint gods. After a fierce battle with Xiaoling Yu, 2 saint gods died in battle. Only then did they understand that this crazy expert was not someone they could deal with. However, less than 1,000 years after Xiaoling Yu fell into madness, all the cultivators in the stone forest, including the saint gods, had lost their minds. Endless slaughter continued to take place in the stone forest. No one noticed that the stone pillars had changed at this moment. Chapter 687. Somewhere in the stone forest, a thin old man was sitting cross-legged on top of a stone pillar that was about 10,000 feet tall. A jade slip was floating above the old man's head. At this time, the jade slip was constantly emitting a faint golden light, enveloping the old man in golden light. The blood mist that was constantly gushing out from the stone pillar and the arrangement in the stone forest that could corrode a cultivator's soul did not seem to affect the old man at all. Feeling the changes in the stone forest, the old man opened his eyes and muttered to himself, "Such a bloodthirsty demon array, I fear that only an ancient demonic path giant could arrange it. Even after so many years, it still has such power and influence. Let them fight for a while first. It won't be too late for me to make a move when the last one is left." After muttering to himself, the old man closed his eyes again, as if he did not care about the changes in the stone forest. The stone pillars in the stone forest were constantly moving. Under the effect of the array, the cultivators who entered the stone forest encountered each other more and more often, making the battle more intense. Although they had lost their minds, all the experts had a very good fighting instinct. Some of the spells and magic treasures that they were familiar with could be used in battle. Under the effect of the blood mist, all the cultivators became more and more courageous as they fought. The killing intent on their bodies was almost condensed into a substance. The 2 clans had a large number of cultivators, but now there was probably less than 1% of them left. Only the experts were left. The battle continued. The endless blood mist had already drowned the stone forest. From outside the stone forest or in the air, the tall stone pillars could no longer be seen. In the blood mist, in addition to the sounds of the cultivators fighting, there was also a burst of demonic sound. It was as if thousands of demons were roaring together, causing one's expression to change. What was even more strange was that the blood mist could condense into shapes. They were all hideous and terrifying. They were tall, as if countless bloodthirsty demons had gathered here. The cultivators who were in a state of madness did not care about the changes in the environment. They killed blindly and died in the slaughter. Having lost their minds, the experts of the two clans naturally did not band together or cooperate. They even frequently attacked experts of their own clans. Under such circumstances, Xiaolingyu was naturally extremely advantageous. Even if he did not release the 8 black armor clones or use any magic treasures, he could still easily kill Saint God experts. Even if he was surrounded by several Saint Gods who had lost their minds, he could still kill his way out. However, the situation was so chaotic that everyone only knew how to kill. They did not know how to rest or avoid danger. In the frenzy of battle, injuries were naturally inevitable. At this moment, even Xiaolingyu's body that was comparable to an ordinary saint artifact was covered in wounds. Blood continuously flowed from his wounds, but Xiaolingyu did not know how to seal them. No one leaped into the air. Instead, they walked quickly on the ground of the stone forest in search of their opponents. Every step they took left behind bloody footprints, as if they were demons crawling out from a sea of blood. The stone pillars were constantly moving in order to gather the scattered cultivators together. Any cultivator who entered the stone forest would not be able to escape the slaughter. At this rate, there would definitely be only one cultivator left in the stone forest, and that cultivator would naturally be the strongest. Of course, in a state of madness, the cultivator's strength would be greatly reduced. However, the degree of reduction would not be the same. Some cultivators who were clearly very strong when they were sober would have their strength greatly reduced after going berserk. They might not be able to defeat weaker cultivators who were weaker than them but whose strength had not decreased by much in a state of madness. In a battle below the heavenly ascension realm, Xiaolingyu's advantages were too obvious. Especially with his fleshly body that was comparable to a sacred artifact, as well as the extremely powerful primal true fire, he was able to stand in an invincible position in this kind of crazy battle. In addition, such battles would drag on for a long time. No one would deliberately recover their strength. Xiaolingyu had countless blood crystals to help him store his strength, which was also a great advantage. A strong body, powerful primal chaos true fire, and sufficient strength. These advantages could be used automatically even in a state of madness. It was not like some spells or magic treasures that cultivators who had lost their rationality could not use or control. Less than a month had passed since the stone forest began to be filled with blood mist. There were only 2 cultivators left in the stone forest who had gone berserk, and one of them was Xiaolingyu. However, the foreign race expert was already an arrow at the end of its flight. His body was covered in terrifying wounds and his body was swaying. Even so, the foreign race's saint deity did not hesitate to attack Xiaolingyu. However, just as he reached Xiaolingyu sent him flying with a kick. The foreign race's saint deity's body fiercely smashed into a stone pillar and fell heavily. However, he struggled to get up and pounced at Xiaolingyu again. When he approached again, Xiaolingyu grabbed the foreign race's saint deity's arms. Ha! Xiaolingyu roared and tore off the foreign race's saint deity's arms, causing blood to splatter everywhere. The foreign race's saint deity only cried out in pain and then tried to bite Xiaolingyu with his mouth. On the other hand, Xiaolingyu's hand was like a blade as it chopped down on the saint god's neck, instantly beheading him. The only cultivator left who had gone berserk was Xiaolingyu. The blood mist in the stone forest churned even more violently. The roars of countless demons were like thunder that shook the sky. The entire stone forest was shaking, and the stone pillars were moving at a much faster speed. What was even stranger was that many of the stone pillars, which were originally erected on the ground, stuck close to each other as they rapidly moved. Some of the stone pillars even rose from the ground and piled up together. In 10 minutes, all the stone pillars in the stone forest stopped moving and a tall and majestic fortress that occupied an extremely large area was formed. There was a wide and tall stone platform in the middle of the fortress. The stone platform was like a plaza, but it also looked like a coliseum. The structure of the fortress was very simple. From the outside, it looked like a flat wall made of huge stones. From the inside, it looked like a circle of stairs that led to the audience seats of the arena. The demons formed by the blood mist were all on the stairs. Their bodies became more and more solid as they bared their fangs and brandished their claws and roared wantonly. They were like demons from the underworld that had been resurrected from ancient times. If Xiaolingyu was conscious, he would definitely feel his scalp go numb. But now that he had lost his mind, he was still waving at the demons around him. It was as if the demons were cheering for him and cheering for him. At this moment, the elder who had not been affected by the array flew down from the top of the fortress and landed on the stone platform. He was only a few hundred feet away from Xiaolingyu. Xiaolingyu, who had lost his mind, naturally rushed up excitedly when he saw an opponent on the platform. When the old man saw that Xiaolingyu was charging towards him, he did not panic in the slightest. With a piece of jade on his head, his body was wrapped in a circle of faint golden light. When Xiaolingyu arrived in front of him, his body swayed and he moved 2 feet to the side. Xiaolingyu, who was charging at him aggressively, naturally missed. Furthermore, his left shoulder was tightly grabbed by the elder. The elder pulled hard. He thought that he would be able to tear the other party's arm off, but instead, he flung the other party's entire body away. His physical body is so strong. The elder was a little surprised, but he moved again. In a flash, he was in front of Xiaolingyu again. After Xiaolingyu was flung away, he crashed onto the stone platform. Before he could get up, the elder had already raised his foot and stomped down viciously. Xiaolingyu, who still had 70% of his combat strength, was not slow at all despite his madness. He rolled his body and dodged the other party's kick. Bang! The seemingly weak old man stomped his foot down, creating a huge hole in the incomparably hard stone platform. With the large hole as the center, there were even more than 10 cracks in the stone slab. If this stomp had landed on Xiaolingyu, even if his body was comparable to a saint artifact, he would probably vomit blood even if a few of his ribs were not broken. After rolling, Xiaolingyu quickly got up. He pushed his feet back and dove towards his opponent like a fish. Although Xiaolingyu's movements were as fast as lightning, the elder was even faster. Before Xiaolingyu could reach him, the elder had already dodged to the side and raised his elbow to smash Xiaolingyu's back. The force of this elbow was very strong. Although Xiaolingyu was thrown a few feet forward, he still landed heavily on the stone slab and could not help but vomit a mouthful of blood. Regardless of whether it was strength or speed, the elder was much stronger than Xiaolingyu at this moment. He far surpassed the other sacred gods and was probably at the Heaven Ascension realm. Only a Heaven Ascension realm expert could maintain such a large advantage in front of Xiaolingyu. After landing again, Xiaolingyu quickly got up again. He was in a state of madness and did not feel the slightest bit of pain. The elder frowned slightly and muttered to himself in a low voice, "This formation is too strange. It actually restricts the use of divine abilities and spells. It also does not allow me to communicate with any power between heaven and earth. I can't even use any magic treasures. Otherwise, I would be able to destroy this kid in one move." Since he was always at a disadvantage in close combat, Xiaolingyu instinctively formed the Primal Chaos Seal. However, the Primal Chaos Seal did not appear. He also found that he could not release his power and his consciousness was firmly confined in his sea of consciousness. However, Xiaolingyu, who was unconscious, did not mind whether or not he could cast spells, nor did he want to use any magic treasures. He rushed towards the old man again. However, no matter how Xiaolingyu charged, the elder was able to dodge with a simple movement and use his fists and legs to attack him. Although the elder's fists and legs were strong and could easily injure an ordinary sacred god, Xiaolingyu's body was too strong. Even if he was hit repeatedly by the elder, he would only suffer a surge in his blood and qi. Moreover, whenever Xiaolingyu was hit, the special energy in his body that he had absorbed from the Thunder Fiend karmic fire would help him reduce the impact of the attack. As a result, it would be very difficult for the elder to finish off Xiaolingyu in a short period of time. The elder gradually discovered that the spatial pressure on the stone platform was gradually increasing. His and his opponent's strength would be greatly restricted. Chapter 688. This was the battle that Xiaolingyu had to face alone. He was also the strongest opponent he had ever faced. The old man's cultivation level was much higher than Shaolin Yu's. Although the advantage in cultivation level was not obvious in this special battle arena, the old man's attacks were definitely not inferior to Shaolin Yu's. Furthermore, the speed of his attacks was much faster than Shaolin Yu's. Shaolin Yu's attacks were almost useless against the old man. On the other hand, the old man's attacks hit Shaolin Yu every time. Shaolin Yu was at an absolute disadvantage. He could not retaliate at all. If not for his strong body, he would have died on the spot. The spatial pressure was getting stronger. Not only did Shaolin Yu's speed decrease, but even the old man was much slower than before. Moreover, an hour had passed since the battle began. Although Shaolin Yu's injuries had worsened, the jade slip above the old man's head had also dimmed and fallen into his body. It was unknown whether it was because of the exhaustion of energy, or because the external pressure was too great, or because of the restrictions of the formation. The old man's sinister face turned even uglier. He said in surprise, to think that even divine spiritual treasures would be restricted. I was too naive. The jade slip sank into his body. The old man's body was no longer enveloped by the golden light. The erosion of the erased state of mind and consciousness would naturally affect him as well. I have to end this battle quickly. The old man finally stopped dodging and attacking passively. He took the initiative to attack. Shaolin Yu pounced at him. He endured the immense spatial pressure and met him head-on. Bang! The old man kicked out, and Shaolin Yu's body flew back dozens of feet. Shaolin Yu landed on the hard stone platform and spat out a few mouthfuls of blood. However, he quickly stood up. Unfortunately, just as he stood up, the old man came at him again and punched him in the chest. Bang! Shaolin Yu was sent flying again. However, he stood up again. Bang! 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 In the next 2 hours, the old man repeatedly attacked Shaolin Yu. However, every time he was knocked down, Shaolin Yu was able to stand up again. However, Shaolin Yu could get up immediately after being knocked down. Later on, he had to crawl on the stone platform for a while before he could get up. The reason for this was not only because his injuries were getting worse, but also because the spatial pressure was too strong. The speed of the old man's attacks was naturally much slower. Moreover, in just a short 2 hours, fine veins had appeared in his eyes, and there was a faint blood-red glow on his body. Go to hell, brat! Shaolin Yu stood up again. The old man roared as he knocked him down again. However, the old man was already showing signs of madness. It seemed that he had also been eroded by the formation, and his state of mind was no longer stable. Shaolin Yu could only passively take a beating. He could not dodge the old man's attacks. Therefore, the increasing spatial pressure was beneficial to him. The old man's attack speed had decreased. Not only did it reduce the number of times Shaolin Yu was hit, but it also reduced the old man's strength. The old man's attacks were getting weaker and weaker. Shaolin Yu could withstand the old man's attacks. Although Shaolin Yu's injuries were very serious, Shaolin Yu could still withstand the old man's attacks. Shaolin Yu's body had been tempered thousands of times. He had been severely injured, tortured, and destroyed countless times. Even if he was seriously injured, he would not collapse. If this continues, I'll be dragged into a state of madness by this kid. He might even exhaust me to death. The old man made up his mind. Although he had not lost his mind, he crushed a specially made bag. After the bag was crushed, a golden light shone out. The golden light circled in front of him and turned into a golden armored puppet. The golden armored puppet was 10 feet tall. It was clad in golden armor, held a golden spear, wore a golden helmet, and wore golden boots. It looked mighty and extraordinary. Kill him! The old man shouted at the golden armored puppet. The golden armored puppet was very obedient. Although its eyes were empty, its steps were steady and firm. It waved the spear in its hand and stabbed it at Shaolin Yu. Although Shaolin Yu still had the instinct to dodge the attack, his injuries were too serious. The spatial pressure here was too great. His shoulder was still pierced by the spear. There was already a wound on his shoulder, and the spear happened to pierce the wound. He immediately felt pain. However, this pain did not affect him much because he was in a state of madness. He grabbed the golden spear with a sinister smile and pulled it out of his shoulder. "Ha, you have a helper, but so do I." Xiaoling Yu laughed maniacally. Then, he slapped himself, and 8 black lights immediately flew out. The 8 black lights circled for a while and turned into 8 black armored clones. If the old man had not released the golden armored puppet, Xiaoling Yu, who was in a state of madness, would not have thought of his black armored clones at all. The 8 black armored clones circled above the chaotic divine infant all year round. When Xiaoling Yu was cultivating in seclusion in the chaotic spectrum, he often used the chaotic primordial fire to temper the 8 clones. Now, the strength of the clones' bodies was not inferior to Xiaoling Yu's. The 8 black armored clones did not participate in the battle earlier. Although they were affected by the injuries of their original bodies and their strength was slightly reduced, they were not injured and were in very good condition. Whether it was the golden armored puppet or the 8 black armored clones, they were naturally restricted by the spatial pressure. However, there were 8 black armored clones after all, and only 1 golden armored puppet. The golden armored puppet did not have the strength of the old man. Moreover, it was already surrounded by the 8 black armored clones. Under the attacks of the 8 clones, it only lasted for less than 100 breaths before collapsing. The golden armored puppet was also not as tenacious as Xiaoling Yu. After it collapsed, it was unable to stand up again. Even the spear in its hand was snatched away by one of the black armored clones. The old man did not stop. As his golden armored puppet was defeated, he struck Xiaoling Yu a few more times, but the effect was minimal. When the 8 black armored clones finished off the golden armored puppet and surrounded Xiaoling Yu, the old man finally realized the severity of the problem. His expression changed again and again, and he actually gave up on continuing to attack. While he was still conscious, he left the stone platform. The old man moved with all his strength and quickly landed on the platform. He then climbed up the stone steps that surrounded the city and climbed to the top. This divine master cultivator actually wanted to flee without a fight, and even wanted to escape from the siege. The demons formed by the blood mist that were originally roaring on the stone steps pounced on the old man. The old man was also valiant. He constantly waved his arms and beat the demons into clouds of blood mist. However, there were too many demons in the siege. They crazily surged over and caused great trouble for the old man. The old man climbed the stone steps very slowly. The old man was already very irritated and angry when he could not defeat Xiaoling Yu for a long time. In addition, the formation here was corroding his mind, and he was on the verge of madness. Now that he was surrounded and attacked by the demons, his state of mind fell even faster. Before he reached the top of the siege, he had already lost his state of mind and had completely sunk into madness. When the old man was escaping, Xiaoling Yu, who was in a state of madness, wanted to chase after him. However, he was heavily injured and suppressed by the great force, so he could not move at all. After falling into madness, the old man naturally would not go to the top of the siege. Moreover, the demons deliberately blocked him, causing him to change direction and return to the stone platform. Once on the stone platform, the old man brazenly charged at Xiaoling Yu. His attacks were no longer as steady and methodical as before. At first, the old man was still able to maintain his speed advantage, but gradually, his movements slowed down. In the end, the old man slowly approached the 8 black armored clones and was firmly held down by them and pressed against the stone platform. Then, the irrational Xiaoling Yu and the 8 black armored clones tore at the old man's body like ferocious beasts. They even used their teeth to bite him like hungry wolves pouncing on their prey. The old man was the same. He also wanted to bite back, but his limbs and head were firmly held down by the clones. He was the one who could not move at all. This old man was destined to be one of the most tragic Empyrean experts in the divine realm. Not only did he die in battle on this stone platform, he died in an incomparably miserable manner. No one could imagine that an Empyrean expert would be eaten alive by someone else. The old man's divine infant was naturally not spared. His divine infant was much weaker than his physical body, and it was even more delicious to Xiaoling Yu, who was in a state of madness. After his physical body and divine infant were eaten piece by piece, the old man's divine soul golden pearl was not chewed because it was too tough. However, the soul power contained in it was slowly dissipating. Without his physical body and divine infant, the consciousness in the divine soul golden pearl gradually dissipated. The formation's corrosion of the soul completely seeped into the divine soul golden pearl without any hindrance. A divine master powerhouse died just like that. Of the cultivators who entered this ancient battlefield from the outside, only Xiaoling Yu was left. As for the 8 black armored clones, they eventually sank into Xiaoling Yu's dantian because they were under too much pressure. The spatial pressure was too strong. The heavily injured Xiaoling Yu crawled on the stone platform. Although she struggled with all her might, she could not get up. After persevering on the stone platform for a while, Xiaoling Yu finally fainted. Less than 4 hours after Xiaoling Yu fainted, the encirclement started to shake again. The stone pillars that formed the encirclement began to reassemble. As the stone pillars reassembled, the demon formed by the blood mist rapidly gathered together and liquefied. Gradually, it turned into a blob of blood water the size of a watermelon. The strange thing was that after the blob of blood water trembled slightly, it slowly turned into a little blood man that looked like a nascent soul. The little blood man was only half a foot tall, but he appeared to be very agile. He flew around Xiaoling Yu in a circle and actually spoke in human language. He said with great satisfaction, "This body is not bad. Although this fellow has not reached the divine master realm, once I recover, cultivation will not be a problem." After waiting for so many years, seeing that this space could no longer hold on, the heavens actually sent me such a good body. My painstaking efforts were not in vain. Once I recover, I will definitely bathe Divine Master Island in blood. Chapter 689. As soon as the little bloody man touched Xiaoling Yu's body, it quickly melted and turned into a blood-red halo that wrapped around Xiaoling Yu's body. In an instant, Xiaoling Yu suddenly opened his eyes, which were completely blood-red. "I'm not used to it, but I think I can still cast a spell to leave this place." The little bloody man's voice sounded again, and then Xiaoling Yu's fingers began to move rapidly while he chanted an incantation. Accompanied by the set of mysterious seals and the awkward incantation, the surrounding stone pillars moved faster. After 10 minutes, countless stone pillars piled up to form a huge hexagonal stone array. Xiaoling Yu was in the center of the stone array at this time. Groups of seals were constantly being formed, and blood-red incantation patterns began to appear on the surface of the hexagonal stone array. When Xiaoling Yu stopped, the surface of the hexagonal stone array had begun to flow with blood-red light, but the blood-red light on his body had weakened a lot. "The array is completed, but I'm afraid I'll have to sleep for a while before I can wake up and recover my strength. It's good enough that I can leave this place with such a good body. I'll sleep on this kid. As long as he doesn't provoke too powerful experts, no one will be able to find me. That reaching heaven cultivator has a lot of good things on him. I can't leave them here and waste them." While speaking, Xiaoling Yu directly swallowed some magic treasures and storage rings lying on the ground into his stomach, and then continued to form seals with a solemn expression. Not long after, a hexagonal blood-red light seal appeared on Xiaoling Yu's chest. As he shouted, the blood-red light seal whizzed out and flew into the air. "Realm-breaking blood escape, activate." Accompanied by the shout, the hexagonal blood-red light seal suddenly expanded countless times in the air, and then fell from the sky and sank into the hexagonal stone array. Suddenly, the hexagonal stone array began to shake violently, and a mighty blood-red light beam bombarded a point in the void. After 10 breaths, a terrifying black vortex appeared in the void that was bombarded. The black vortex spun faster and faster, and the hexagonal stone array shook even more violently. Another 100 breaths passed, and the hexagonal stone formation began to spin rapidly along with the black vortex, gradually turning into a huge blood-colored cocoon of light that tightly wrapped around Xiaoling Yu. The blood-colored cocoon of light slowly wrapped around Xiaoling Yu and flew into the black vortex. When it completely fell into the black vortex, it suddenly accelerated, and like an arrow leaving a bow, it flew deeper into the vortex. In the process of flying forward, the thickness of the blood-colored cocoon continued to decrease, as if a lot of its power had been consumed on the way. After an hour, the blood-red cocoon of light finally emerged from the black vortex. By then, only a thin layer of the cocoon was left. At this moment, the bloody light on Xiaoling Yu's body became very weak. He fell from the void and landed on a beach in the sea. This world-piercing blood escape consumes too much energy. I have to sleep immediately. This should be Skyspan's sacred island. After saying this, Xiaoling Yu collapsed on the beach, allowing the sea breeze to blow and the waves to beat on his body. After an unknown period of time, a group of cultivators with dragon heads and human bodies arrived on the beach. They quickly discovered Xiaoling Yu and carefully surrounded him. The group of cultivators circled Xiaoling Yu a few times, and then one of them took out a large harpoon and viciously stabbed it at Xiaoling Yu's chest. To the cultivators' surprise, their sharp harpoon could not pierce Xiaoling Yu's body. Then, the cultivator with the harpoon leaped high into the air and quickly landed, his harpoon striking down again. What happened next shocked them even more. When the harpoon pierced Xiaoling Yu's chest, it actually broke with a crack. Then, all the cultivators took out their own weapons and attacked Xiaoling Yu's body. However, their weapons either broke or curled up. They could not do anything to Xiaoling Yu. They could not even cut Xiaoling Yu's skin. The group of cultivators chattered for a while, then carried Xiaoling Yu with their backs to the sea. After 3 days, the group of cultivators arrived at a small village and placed Xiaoling Yu at the village entrance. After a cultivator entered the village, he ran wildly and shouted. Not long after, countless cultivators were attracted to the village entrance, surrounding Xiaoling Yu so tightly that not even a drop of water could trickle through. The cultivators in the village all had dragon heads and human bodies, but their cultivation was not high. Not long after, an elderly cultivator came to the village entrance. He stared at Xiaoling Yu for a while, his expression uncertain. After the old man's strange shout, the cultivators surrounding the village entrance carried Xiaoling Yu into the village. In the middle of the village, there was a small square. In the middle of the square, there was a large iron pillar that needed 3 people to wrap their arms around. The group of cultivators tied Xiaoling Yu to the iron pillar. Thick iron chains that seemed to be made of black iron were used to tie her up. They looked very sturdy. After that, the old man opened his mouth and spat out a stream of scorching flames at the iron pillar. Suddenly, the entire iron pillar began to burn like a piece of wood. The cultivators in the square all clapped their hands and cheered. They circled around the iron pillar and danced a strange dance while singing an even stranger song. Xiaoling Yu's body was probably the least afraid of being burned by fire. Moreover, the flames on the iron pillar were not very strong. They could not harm Xiaoling Yu in the slightest. After burning for 3 whole days, the old man saw that the flames did not seem to have any effect. He cast a spell to extinguish the flames. Then, he took out a transmission pearl and sent out a message. A few more days passed. A divine light flew into the sky above the village and landed directly on the square. The newcomer was also a dragon head cultivator. However, his cultivation was clearly much higher than the cultivators in the village. The old man and the cultivator exchanged a few words. The cultivator circled the iron pillar a few more times. Then, the old man released the iron chains and wrapped Xiaoling Yu's body with divine power. He flew into the sky. After a few more days, the cultivator stopped in front of a small city gate. The cultivator brought Xiaoling Yu into the city lord's manor. Not long after, an even stronger dragon head cultivator came to the small city and brought Xiaoling Yu away. This stronger dragon head cultivator brought Xiaoling Yu to a rather large city. Similarly, he tied her up in a secret room under the city lord's manor. There was also a large iron pillar in this secret room. Xiaoling Yu was tied to the pillar. The pillar burned with raging flames. The flames were strong enough to cause the space of the god realm to tremble slightly. However, they were unable to harm Xiaoling Yu's body in the slightest. The Dragon Head City Lord of this large city waited in the secret room for close to 3 months. In the end, he had no choice but to extinguish the flames. He could only take out his transmission pearl and report this matter to his superiors. However, this time, it took close to 10 years for a single God Emperor stage flood Dragon Head expert to arrive. When the God Emperor stage dragon-headed expert saw Shaolin Yu, his face changed drastically. He carefully observed Shaolin Yu for a while, and only when he was sure that Shaolin Yu was unconscious did he feel relieved. After hesitating for a long time, this Dragon-Head God Emperor expert wrapped Shaolin Yu's body and flew out of the large city. After flying for 10 years, passing by countless small villages and cities of various sizes, this God Emperor expert finally stopped in front of a mountain range. This mountain range was very large. There were countless mountain peaks that rose and fell continuously. However, compared to a real mountain range, it was much smaller. It could barely be considered a small mountain range. On the mountain peaks of this mountain range, there were many clearly visible caves. Many Dragon Head cultivators moved between the mountain peaks and entered these caves. Rather than calling it a mountain range, it was more appropriate to call it a place where countless Dragon Head cultivators gathered. Its scale was much larger than an ordinary city. From the appearance of this mountain range, one could guess that the Dragon Head cultivators had deliberately built this small mountain range into a large city. The Dragon Head God Emperor expert flew into the mountain range with Shaolin Yu. He did not meet with any obstructions along the way. He smoothly reached the depths of the mountain range. In the depths of the mountain range, there was a towering mountain that reached the clouds. This mountain was also the only one in this mountain range that did not seem to have a single cave. Around this mountain, there were 9 slightly shorter mountain peaks. They surrounded the mountain like stars surrounding the moon. No matter if it was the main peak of the mountain in the center or the 9 sub-peaks around it, they were all very quiet. It was rare to see any Dragon Head cultivators entering or leaving. Furthermore, there was a flat plaza at the top of each mountain. There was a very thick iron pillar at the top of each of the 9 secondary peaks. On the main peak, there was an even thicker iron pillar at the top of the main peak. There was also an ancient and heavy temple. The iron pillar at the top of the main peak stood in front of the temple with its doors shut. It was engraved with complex and mysterious runes. The Dragon Head God Emperor expert first brought Shaolin Yu to the foot of one of the sub-peaks. He found a stone wall and placed Shaolin Yu down. He then formed seals and sent them into the stone wall. After a moment, the stone wall disappeared, revealing a cave entrance. After bringing Shaolin Yu into the cave entrance disappeared. The cave was very deep, and there was a slope that extended upwards. After walking for the time it took to brew a cup of tea, the cave became slightly more spacious. A large cave appeared in front of them. In the center of the cave, there was a green stone. An old Dragon Head cultivator was sitting on the green stone with his eyes closed. He seemed to be cultivating. After the Dragon Head God Emperor expert entered the cave, he bowed respectfully. When the expert on the green stone opened his eyes, he went forward to say a few words. After chatting for a while, the old man on the green stone waved his hand at the Dragon Head God Emperor expert. The Dragon Head God Emperor expert bowed and left. The old man on the green stone waved his sleeve. Shaolin Yu's body was swept up by an invisible force and slowly moved to the front of the old man. The old man first observed for a while. Suddenly, he opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of raging flames. The raging flames instantly enveloped Shaolin Yu's body. However, after burning for a long time, nothing strange happened. Chapter 690. But this time, the old man didn't tie Shaolin Yu to the iron pillar at the top of the secondary peak. Instead, he brought Shaolin Yu to the top of the iron pillar, then made a hand seal and sent it into the iron pillar. The moment the hand seal entered the iron pillar, a dazzling light flashed out, enveloping the old man and Shaolin Yu as they flew to the top of the main peak. A moment later, the old man and Shaolin Yu landed at the top of the iron pillar in the plaza at the top of the main peak. Then, they floated down and arrived in front of the sealed temple. The old man walked to the temple's door and lightly knocked on the door knocker. Not long after, the temple's mahogany door creaked open. The old man wrapped Xiaolingyu in his divine power and walked into the temple, arriving at a large hall. The hall wasn't very spacious, and there were 9 iron pillars inside, making it seem even more spacious. At the center of the 9 iron pillars was a mysterious 9-pointed star formation, as well as a prayer mat. A thin cultivator was sitting cross-legged on the prayer mat with his back facing the temple's door. The old man with the dragon head took 2 steps forward, bowed deeply, and said a few words. Only then did the cultivator sitting on the praying mat turn around, revealing a shocking face. From the front, the cultivator was clearly a woman. She had a slender waist, a pair of full breasts, a neck as white as jade, and a pair of slender, jade-like hands. If one only looked at her, they would definitely think that she was a peerlessly beautiful human woman. However, if an ordinary cultivator were to look at the woman's face, they would definitely be given a fright. Her face was the clean and delicate face of a human woman, but the other half was the side of a snake's face. Only half of the human female's head had hair. The snake-like half was bald and covered in tiny scales. One of the eyes was a human's, while the other was a snake's. If this woman covered her snake face and only looked at her human face, she would definitely be a devastatingly beautiful woman. The old man must have seen this woman often, so he wasn't surprised by her strange appearance. However, he didn't dare to look at her for too long. After saying a few words with his head lowered, he silently left the temple. The temple's door closed again, but it wasn't dark inside. The woman waved her hand, and Xiaolingyu's body was teleported in front of her. She stared at Xiaolingyu for a long while, her eyebrows knitted together. He's a human expert. What realm is he at? His body is comparable to a sacred artifact. Has he entered the Ingress realm? Even my divine sense can't penetrate his body, but he's clearly in a deep sleep. Why does he give me a sinister feeling? The injuries on his body haven't healed yet. He must have just gone through a great battle and was seriously injured, which is why he fainted. The woman muttered as she observed Xiaolingyu. Strangely, the woman's words were exactly the same as human cultivators. This person's body is overflowing with an evil aura. I'm afraid he's not a kind person. If he wakes up, it'll be detrimental to our clan. No, we have to send him out of our clan. No, his injuries have already stabilized. If he wakes up on the road, do we have to take advantage of this situation and kill him in our clan? If there are other experts behind him, won't killing him bring trouble to our clan? Let's seal him in a heavenly coffin first. Thinking of this, the woman stood up and continuously formed seals with her hands, sending them into the 9 large iron pillars around her. After the seals were completed, the 9 pillars suddenly shot out a beam of divine light at the same time. The 9 beams of divine light shot towards the wall facing the temple's door. Immediately, an almost transparent crystal coffin appeared at the base of the wall. The woman dragged Xiaolingyu's body to the crystal coffin and waved her arm. In the next moment, Xiaolingyu's body fell into the crystal coffin. However, the coffin never opened. With a body comparable to a saint artifact, he should be able to withstand the heavenly fire for a period of time. If an expert comes during this time, I'll let him out and tell him to heal with the heavenly fire in the heavenly coffin. After all, heavenly fire does have a healing effect on experts of the immortal ascension realm. If no expert comes, the heavenly fire will occasionally burn away his flesh and blood while healing him, causing his body's resistance to decline. At that time, I'll cast a spell, and he'll be incinerated into nothingness by the heavenly fire in the heavenly coffin. The woman sneered and formed the seal with a wave of her hand. The seal sank into the crystal coffin and caused it to tremble. Then, a ball of brilliant white flames appeared and enveloped Xiaolingyu's body. Then, the woman returned to the center of the 9 great iron pillars and sat cross-legged on the square prayer mat. After waiting quietly for nearly a month and seeing that the human cultivator in the crystal coffin was still and unharmed, the woman formed another seal and sent it into the 9 great iron pillars. The 9 great iron pillars once again released divine light and blasted the wall opposite the door. A moment later, the crystal coffin was concealed. The woman formed a lotus with her hand and slowly closed her eyes. 100 years passed in the blink of an eye. The temple was still as quiet as ever, and the woman did not move at all. However, Xiaolingyu, who was in the crystal coffin, finally began to regain consciousness and gradually woke up. If not for the scorching flames burning his body and the intense pain that came from his body and shook his soul, Xiaolingyu might have been unconscious for a long time. When he opened his eyes, Xiaolingyu was still a little groggy. However, the burning pain in his body was even clearer now. Xiaolingyu instinctively wanted to get up, but just as he raised his head, he felt his head collide with a hard object. Xiaolingyu felt like he was in a dream. He quickly calmed himself down. In an unknown place, he had to be calm. Right now, he was being burned by extremely powerful flames. His body was already a little overwhelmed, but he could still hold on for a while. Using this time, Xiaolingyu began to recall everything that had happened before. Unfortunately, he could only remember that he came out of the primal chaos spectrum and then fell into madness. However, he did not have any memory of what happened after the madness. Right, there was the primal chaos spectrum. Thinking of this, Xiaolingyu immediately shouted, "Primal chaos spectrum, take me in." The primal chaos spectrum did not disappoint him. Even in this special environment, the primal chaos spectrum still easily took him in. As soon as he entered the primal chaos spectrum, Xiaolingyu did not have time to rest before he was surrounded by Miaoying, Qing Xian, and Ling Er. Xiaolingyu had not fallen into madness for long, but after all, the flow of time in the primal chaos spectrum was 10,000 times faster. 100 years outside was 1,000,000 years inside. Moreover, it was far more than 100 years outside. During this period of time, the three women in the primal chaos spectrum were constantly worried about Xiaolingyu. After all, when Xiaolingyu went out, he was in a state of madness. And in the primal chaos spectrum, only Xiaolingyu could see the scene outside through the light door. I'm fine. You guys go to the side first and let me have a good rest." Xiaolingyu waved his hand at the three women, then immediately sat down cross-legged and fed himself some pills. The three women saw that although Xiaolingyu was in a sorry state, his face was extremely pale and his state was very chaotic, but he had recovered his consciousness. They were all relieved. While recuperating, Xiaolingyu discovered that there were a few more things in his dantian. After taking a closer look, he could not help but frown because he was not familiar with these things. They were not what he used to have. When and how did they enter his dantian? Could it be that I killed other experts and snatched them when I fell into madness? It should be. Xiaolingyu could only think of such a possibility. Anyway, he had a few more treasures. It was not a bad thing, so he did not think too much about it. Xiaolingyu was even more relieved when he moved those things out of his dantian and found that they were all ownerless. These three are all sacred artifacts. The quality is not bad. I can give them to Miaoying and the others to protect themselves. I can't see the quality of this jade. It's not afraid of being burned by the primal chaos true fire. Could it be a divine spirit treasure? What was this bead? How could it contain such pure and dense soul power? Could it be a golden soul bead? It should be a golden soul bead, but the soul power in it seems to be more than 10 times more than my golden soul bead. It definitely doesn't belong to a holy god cultivator. Could it be a divine master? The jade and the golden soul bead quickly attracted Xiaolingyu's attention. After looking at them carefully, Xiaolingyu's face was not only surprised, but also excited and happy that he had received a windfall from the sky. After carefully inspecting his body, as well as his dantian and sea of consciousness, Xiaolingyu calmed down and began to recuperate. Time passed faster in the primal chaos spectrum. Only a few months had passed in the outside world, and Xiaolingyu had already recovered. Originally, Xiaolingyu's injuries had been very serious, but during the battle, he and the 8 clones had eaten the flesh of the Heavenly Master Warriors, and the life essence of the Heavenly Master Warriors would naturally be of great help to him in recovering from his injuries. In addition, the heavenly fire that burned Xiaoling Yu previously also had a good healing effect, so he was able to recover quickly in the primal chaos spectrum. After recovering, Xiaoling Yu first communicated with the three girls, but did not get any useful information. Then, he came out of the primal chaos spectrum. The bright white flame burned his body again. Although Xiaoling Yu felt unbearably hot and his body was constantly burning, he was able to hold on for a while. However, Xiaoling Yu soon found that he was imprisoned in a narrow space. This narrow space looked like a crystal coffin, and the quality of this crystal coffin was extremely high. He could not break it at all. Chapter 691. The quality of this crystal coffin is extremely high, and there's such a powerful flame inside. There must be an extremely powerful expert guarding outside the crystal coffin. Even if I can get out, I'm afraid that I won't have a good time. It's better to stay inside for a while longer. After making up his mind, Xiaoling Yu temporarily gave up on the idea of breaking the crystal coffin. He stopped in front of a light door in the primal chaos spectrum, cultivating while paying attention to the situation outside. In the blink of an eye, a few million years passed in the primal chaos spectrum, while a few hundred years passed outside. Suddenly, one day, Xiaoling Yu saw the crystal coffin outside tremble. He quickly exited the primal chaos spectrum, then closed his eyes and lay in the crystal coffin. After the crystal coffin shook for a while, it appeared at the foot of the wall of the hall, and the woman was already standing in front of it. Xiaoling Yu was pretending to be unconscious at this time, and his divine sense couldn't penetrate the crystal coffin, so he naturally couldn't see the scene outside. However, he could guess that the owner of the crystal coffin must be watching him from outside. The woman was indeed staring at Xiaoling Yu in the crystal coffin. Seeing that Xiaoling Yu's body had recovered, she nodded in satisfaction and said, "The heavenly flame is restricted by the heavenly coffin, and it can only display less than 1/10,000th of its power. It can't burn him, but its healing effect is very obvious. His injuries seem to have healed. However, it's been so long, and he's been burned by the heavenly flame. Why hasn't he woken up?" The woman was a little suspicious, but seeing that there was no abnormality, she returned to the futon and continued to meditate, hiding the crystal coffin again. "I'll wait for another 1,000 years. If there's still no expert looking for him, I'll let him melt in the heavenly coffin," the woman thought before closing her eyes. When the woman turned around and returned to the futon, Xiaoling Yu boldly opened his eyes and glanced outside the heavenly coffin. Fortunately, he wasn't discovered by the woman. After the crystal coffin was hidden, Xiaoling Yu opened his eyes after a long time, but he couldn't see the scene outside. Returning to the primal chaos spectrum, Xiaoling Yu's expression was very gloomy. He muttered to himself, "Why does this place look like a temple? That cultivator who looks like a beautiful woman from the back is probably very powerful. The flames in the crystal coffin seem to be slightly weaker." Xiaoling Yu then took out the 8-legged Tai Chi cauldron and turned it into the 8-legged monster. Then, she made the 8-legged monster's strength decrease. She then felt the power of the brilliant white flames, wanting to compare it with the brilliant white flames in the crystal coffin outside. This ball of brilliant white flame should be the possession of that ancient expert, Jiao Zhou. A flame that can catch his eye must be extremely powerful. However, because of the restriction of the 8-legged monster, it doesn't seem to be that powerful. If the white flame outside had already displayed its full power, it would only be slightly stronger than my primal chaos primordial fire. Since it's stronger than my chaotic primordial fire, doesn't that mean I can use it to temper my physical body? I should be able to give it a try. Even if that female expert suddenly opens the crystal coffin, I can immediately hide in the primal chaos spectrum. Thinking up to this point, Xiaoling Yu exited the primal chaos scroll and laid down in the crystal coffin. She let go of her defenses and allowed the flames to burn her body and soul. She circulated the fiery tempering technique and gradually attracted the flames to her body. In the blink of an eye, another few hundred years had passed. Xiaoling Yu had already completed 2/3 of the fiery tempering technique. At most, he would be able to end this cultivation in another 200 years. At this critical moment, the crystal coffin trembled slightly again. Xiaoling Yu had already planned this, so he wasn't worried. He still lay in the crystal coffin with his eyes closed, not moving at all. His entire body was being tempered at the same time, so from the outside, he was a bloody mess, looking very miserable. The woman only hurriedly looked at Xiaoling Yu in the crystal coffin, then hid the crystal coffin again and leaped out of the temple. It seems that he's still too injured to withstand the heavenly flames for a long time. However, no expert has come to find him for so many years, so it shouldn't be a problem for him to be burned to death in there. After the woman walked out of the temple, she leaped and flew to the large iron pillar in front of the temple's door. At this moment, the silent main peak and the 9 secondary peaks were extremely noisy. Countless serpent-headed experts had gathered in the plazas of the main and secondary peaks, and they all spat fire at the metal pillars in their respective plazas at the same time. From afar, the peaks of the main and auxiliary peaks looked as if they were all burning. At the top of the iron pillars in the squares of the main and auxiliary peaks, there was a dragon-headed elder standing. They all looked at the large iron pillar at the top of the main peak with solemn expressions. The sky above these 10 peaks was densely covered with dark clouds, and there were even bolts of lightning that flashed like dragons, letting out earth-shaking rumbles after they disappeared. This was a scene of dark clouds covering the sky, with raging winds and heavy rain pouring down. What was even more shocking was that the roars of demon beasts could be faintly heard from the rolling dark clouds. High in the sky, there was also a terrifying pressure that intimidated the dragon-headed cultivators in the mountain city. The woman stood at the top of the iron pillar and looked at the dark clouds in the sky. Then she opened her mouth and said, "Nine-clawed octopus king, over the years, you've repeatedly invaded the temple of my dragon-head clan. Do you really think that my clan can be bullied by you?" The woman looked weak, but her voice was clear and shook the world. No matter how strong the wind and rain were, no matter how thunder shook the 9 heavens, she could still be heard by all the dragon-headed cultivators in the mountain city. "Humph! Your clan's previous prophet stole the heavenly coffin from my cave abode. Woman, you know this very well. Why do you have to play dumb in front of your own people? Return my heavenly coffin, and I'll leave immediately. I'll never come to your clan again." Within the dark clouds, an angry voice rang out. "Don't talk nonsense. Who in the Tongtian East Sea doesn't know that the heavenly coffin is my dragon head clan's inherited spiritual treasure? Your ancestor clearly borrowed it to go through the tribulation, but he failed. You juniors insist that the heavenly coffin is your 9-clawed octopus clan's treasure and forcefully stole it. My clan's previous prophet took back our inherited spiritual treasure in front of your father. How can you say that it was stolen?" The woman replied righteously. "What a joke! My 9-clawed octopus clan has a high status in the Tongtian East Sea. Why would we steal your clan's treasure? I advise you to be sensible and return the heavenly coffin. Otherwise, don't blame me for massacring your clan." The domineering voice came from the dark clouds again. 9-clawed octopus king, your ability to boast is the same as your strength. Every time you say that you'll massacre our clan, you always run away pathetically, the woman said disdainfully. Don't think that the 9 heavens fire-gathering formation can guarantee your clan's eternal peace. Today, I'll break this formation. As soon as he finished speaking, 9 thick black tentacles that were no less than 10,000 feet long came crashing down from the dark clouds toward the 9 sub-peaks. The woman didn't waste any more time. With a shout, her entire body was wrapped in flames, and the flames quickly sank into the large iron pillar beneath her feet. The 9 old men with dragon heads who stood on the huge iron pillars on the other 9 sub-summits plazas also injected their true fire into the huge iron pillars that had already turned red from the heat. The powerhouses of the Flood Dragon clan gathered on the 10 sub-peaks plazas worked even harder to inject their true fire. Suddenly, the 9 large iron pillars on the sub-peaks shot up into the sky at the same time, and the 9 flames quickly gathered on the large iron pillar at the top of the main peak. Before the 9 black tentacles could land, a light screen that was like a large umbrella suddenly appeared, blocking all the ferocious tentacles outside. Then, the woman and the elder with dragon heads on the large iron pillars of the sub-peaks changed their hand seals at the same time, causing the fire dragons to soar from the large iron pillars and pounce on the dark clouds in the sky. The 9 fire dragons danced wantonly in the dark clouds, and in just a few moments, most of the dark clouds had dissipated. However, very soon, terrifying lightning flashed, and like peerless swords, they destroyed the 9 fire dragons. After most of the dark clouds that covered the sky dissipated, a huge octopus demon beast revealed most of its body in the sky. It waved its 9 black tentacles and smashed them fiercely at the umbrella-shaped light curtain that shrouded the entire mountain city. Every time the tentacles lashed out, the entire mountain city would shake violently along with the umbrella-shaped light screen. However, not only did the light screen show no signs of collapsing, but it kept spinning faster. As the light screen was spinning too fast, the tentacles that came crashing down were easily repelled. Moreover, as the light screen spun faster, flames began to appear on the surface of the light screen. The flames were extremely hot. Every time the tentacles came into contact with the flames, sizzling sounds would be heard, and thick black smoke would be emitted. The octopus monster beast with 9 black tentacles seemed to have gone mad. It ignored the pain from each of its tentacles and kept lashing out at the umbrella-shaped light screen. At the same time, it released terrifying lightning bolts to bombard the light screen. The stalemate lasted for nearly a month. Then, another wave of dark clouds rolled in from afar. The group of dark clouds soon arrived in front of them, and a small 9-clawed octopus demon beast was faintly discernible in the dark clouds. The 9-clawed octopus powerhouses that came later also joined the battle. They slapped the light screen with their tentacles, and at the same time, shot out lightning bolts to bombard it. However, even though the 9-clawed octopus powerhouses attacked with all their might, the light screen was still impregnable. The only difference was that the huge iron pillars on the 9 sub-peaks no longer shot out fire dragons to counterattack. The 9-clawed octopus clan attacked with all their might, but they suffered considerable damage due to the flames of the light screen. On the other hand, the Flood Dragon clan defended with all their might, trying their best to maintain the power of the 9 Heavens fire-gathering formation. Ordinary cultivators might not have imagined that the battle between the 2 clans lasted for nearly 100 years before there were any changes. Another 8 dark clouds surged in from all directions, forming an encirclement around the mountain city with the previous dark clouds. In less than an hour, the 9 dark clouds shone with azure light at the same time. Chapter 692. After the blue water droplets landed on the umbrella-shaped light screen, they immediately spread out and extinguished a large area of flames. At the place where the 9 blue lights gathered, the blue water droplets kept falling, causing great trouble for the 9 Heavens fire-gathering array. "Ha, little woman, my blooming water array is not bad, right?" The 9-clawed octopus king's voice sounded again, but it sounded very proud. The woman's expression was very solemn. The 9 Heavens fire-gathering array had been attacked by the enemy for more than a month. Whether it was the array itself or the experts of the Dragon Head clan maintaining the array, they had consumed a lot of energy and would not be able to hold on for much longer. Once the 9 Heavens fire-gathering array was broken, the Dragon Head clan could only fight head-on. Although they were not afraid, they would definitely suffer great losses. If not for the fact that she had no other choice, the woman, as the current prophet of the Dragon Head clan, would definitely not be willing to see the Dragon Head clan face a large-scale battle. This was because regardless of the outcome, the overall strength of the Dragon Head clan would plummet. If they were targeted by other clans, the Dragon Head clan would probably be removed from the Eastern Sea forever. Of course, if the 9-clawed octopus king really pressed on, the Dragon Head clan could only fight with all their might. In the sky, the blue water droplets were still dripping down. The light screen formed by the 9 Heavens fire-gathering array was in imminent danger. The flames on the surface were almost completely extinguished. Without the threat of the flames, the 9-clawed octopus king led the cultivators of the 9-clawed octopus clan to attack even more ferociously. Countless black tentacles of the 9-clawed octopus clan's experts ruthlessly whipped the umbrella-shaped light screen. The rotation speed of the entire light screen was already decreasing, and it was still trembling constantly. It was no longer as calm and unbreakable as before. The woman hesitated for a moment before stealing her heart. She quietly formed a set of seals and sent them into the huge iron pillar under her feet. Not long after, the 9 heavens fire-gathering array seemed to have exhausted its power. A long hole was created by the 9-clawed octopus king's tentacles. Boys, the 9 heavens fire-gathering array has been broken. Follow me in. The 9-clawed octopus king seemed very excited. Its huge body nimbly landed sideways and rushed in through the hole. The other experts from the 9-clawed octopus clan reacted quickly too. 5 saint gods and over 30 god emperors rushed into the light screen. However, when these 9-clawed octopus race powerhouses entered the light screen, the crack in the light screen suddenly disappeared and blocked all the other 9-clawed octopus race cultivators who were about to enter. Little woman, you even know how to scheme. The 9-clawed octopus king's enormous body was on the main peak. Its voice shook the mountains. The woman remained silent, but her hands quickly formed seals. When the 9-clawed octopus king swept one of its tentacles over, she shouted, "Gather fire." As soon as she finished speaking, the 9 secondary peaks shook violently together. Then, the flames they shot toward the main peak became even more majestic. As for the iron pillar on the main peak, after receiving all the flames from the secondary peaks, it was enveloped in raging flames along with the woman on top of the iron pillar. At this moment, the woman waved her arm and more than a dozen fire dragons rushed out from her sleeves. They bared their fangs and brandished their claws as they pounced toward the 9-clawed octopus king. In an instant, the 9-clawed octopus king was surrounded by more than a dozen fire dragons. It kept waving its tentacles to resist and could no longer attack. As for the remaining 9-clawed octopus race powerhouses who broke into the Great Formation, they were naturally dealt with by the other experts from the Flood Dragon clan. The woman quickly changed her hand seals and shouted, "Borrow fire." The Flood Dragon elders who were overseeing the 9 secondary peaks also changed their hand seals at the same time and cooperated with the woman to control the 9 heavens fire-gathering array. When the hand seals were completed, the umbrella-shaped light screen spun even faster. Strangely, the space that stretched for tens of thousands of kilometers with the mountain city as the center was filled with flames. A sea of fire formed in just a few moments. This sea of fire kept stirring up waves of fire that surged toward the mountain city. The fire elemental energy rapidly gathered in the 9 heavens fire-gathering array. At the same time, it posed a great threat to the 9-clawed octopus race cultivators who were hiding in the dark clouds outside. Only then did the woman stop her hand seals. However, she spat out a few mouthfuls of blood along with the 9 elders who were overseeing the secondary peaks. Obviously, it was not an easy task to make the 9 heavens fire-gathering array unleash its power like this. The fire elemental energy released from the 9 secondary peaks was rapidly entering the woman's body, causing her aura to continuously rise. You little woman, if you forcefully increase your strength, you might be able to fight with me. Even if I can't win against you, after this battle, your realm will drop a lot. The 9-clawed octopus king had just defeated the dozen or so fire dragons. Seeing the woman's aura continue to rise, it said disdainfully, "Don't talk about after this battle, because after this battle, you, the 9-clawed octopus king, might no longer exist." The woman replied with a sneer. What big words! The 9-clawed octopus king obviously did not believe it. Its 9 black tentacles swept toward the main peak at the same time. The woman let out a loud shout. Immediately, 9 fire dragons pounced out from her body and met one of the tentacles. Flames burst out and the explosion shook the sky. The 9 fire dragons repelled the 9-clawed octopus king's 9 tentacles, while the flames on the woman's body grew stronger and her aura became stronger. Looks like I'll have to show my true abilities. Otherwise, I won't be able to take you down, little woman. The 9-clawed octopus king's body began to shine with a dark blue radiance. Its 9 tentacles swayed together, and countless blue light swords suddenly formed, forming a rain of swords that rained down on the iron pillar on the main peak. The woman charged toward the 9-clawed octopus king while dragging a long trail of fire behind her as she faced the rain of swords. Even though she was already far away from the iron pillar on the main peak, the woman was still receiving the fire elemental energy from the array. As the woman moved forward, a small umbrella-shaped light screen blocked her front and destroyed all the swords in her path. The woman was extremely fast. Almost in an instant, she had already flown in front of the nine-clawed octopus king. After a flash, she was behind the nine-clawed octopus king. However, the woman's delicate body seemed insignificant in front of the nine-clawed octopus king. If it were not for the fact that she was bathed in flames, no one would be able to see her. The nine-clawed octopus king kept waving its 9 tentacles, but it could not hit the woman on its back no matter how hard it tried. The woman appeared to be very agile as she kept hitting the nine-clawed octopus king's body with streaks of fire. The nine-clawed octopus king could have dodged the woman's attack, but the space in the 9 heavens fire-gathering formation was a little narrow for it, so it was unable to do so. It could not help but feel a little regretful. It should not have charged in just now, but it was clearly an opportunity. With its temper and strength, it could not have held back. After all, the Gui water formation did pose a threat to the 9 heavens fire-gathering formation. At that time, it really thought that the 9 heavens fire-gathering formation could not withstand the attack and had opened an opening. Most importantly, it did not expect the woman to damage her cultivation base to perform a secret array technique to increase her strength. Nevertheless, the 9-clawed octopus king, who was much stronger than the woman, was not afraid even if they were to fight here. After realizing its disadvantage, the 9-clawed octopus king's body suddenly turned into a dark blue ball of light. Then, the ball of light dissipated, and it transformed into a human form. It looked like a middle-aged human cultivator wearing a black battle armor. Then, everyone saw an inky blue ball of light and a fiery red ball of light fighting each other on the main peak. Because both sides were very fast, everyone could only see 2 streams of light constantly flashing. They couldn't see the specific situation of the battle clearly. While the woman was fighting, she was constantly receiving the fire attribute energy transmission from the formation. Her strength was still rising, and her aura was extremely powerful. In the torrential sea of fire outside, countless 9-clawed octopus king defended against the surging fire waves while continuing to attack the umbrella-shaped light screen. However, without the 9-clawed octopus king's powerful attacks, the umbrella-shaped light screen was under a lot less pressure. However, only the woman and the powerhouses of the Flood Dragon clan knew that they would not be able to hold on for too long with the 9 heavens fire-gathering formation's power. They were all sacrificing their cultivation base to maintain the formation. The longer the formation lasted, the greater the loss of their cultivation base. They might even be in danger of losing their lives. In the sky, the 9-clawed octopus king and the woman were evenly matched. Even with the formation increasing her strength, the woman could only barely fight the 9-clawed octopus king. After all, the difference in their strength was too great. The 9-clawed octopus king seemed to know that the formation could not hold on for too long, so the more it fought, the more confident it became. Moreover, it deliberately dragged the fight, unwilling to fight the woman who was eager to fight to the death. If this continued, the situation would become more and more critical for the Flood Dragon clan. Everyone, sacrifice yourselves for our clan. A Flood Dragon clan elder who was overseeing the sub-peak shouted loudly. Sacrifice yourselves for our clan. The elders of the other 8 peaks echoed at the same time. The 9 Flood Dragon clan elders on the sub-peaks made the same hand seals at the same time. After the hand seals were made, their bodies suddenly turned into dazzling balls of fire and quickly fell into the big iron pillars they were sitting on. The 9 big iron pillars burst into flames at the same time, and the fire elemental energy transmitted to the main peak was naturally more vigorous. The big iron pillars on the main peak began to shake continuously, and there were even bursts of clanging sounds. A stronger and more obvious fire elemental energy was madly injected into the woman's body. "No!" the woman exclaimed, but it was too late to stop the 8 powerhouses from sacrificing themselves. She could only feel her strength rapidly increasing again. 9-clawed octopus king, go to hell. The woman originally thought that she would fight the 9-clawed octopus king until both sides were injured, or even perish together. However, she did not expect the 9 elders of her clan to take action. To be honest, the powerhouses of the Flood Dragon clan knew that the clan could afford to lose a few elders, but they could not afford to lose a prophet. After the woman cried out in grief, she rushed toward the 9-clawed octopus king like a rainbow piercing the sun. Her momentum was so strong that it made the 9-clawed octopus king's heart palpitate. Chapter 693. The 9-clawed octopus monarch could sense that the woman's strength had become much stronger than it with the help of the formation. In addition, the 9-clawed octopus monarch was now in the 9 heavens fire-gathering formation, so its strength was already weakened. It had entered because it knew that it was stronger than the woman, but now that she was stronger than it, it had no chance of winning with the help of the formation. It could not even hold her back. Therefore, the 9-clawed octopus monarch finally felt threatened and realized the danger. The 9-clawed octopus monarch did not dare to fight the woman, so it kept dodging and attacking the umbrella-shaped light screen with all its might in an attempt to escape. Unfortunately, the 9-clawed octopus monarch still had to resist the woman's wild attacks and could not attack the umbrella-shaped light screen with all its might. Even if it could, it would not be able to break the light screen in a short time. The woman chased after the 9-clawed octopus monarch as fire dragons kept surging out of her body. In the blink of an eye, the sky near the main peak was filled with fire dragons. None of the 9-clawed octopus clan powerhouses who came in with the 9-clawed octopus monarch were left. Only the 9-clawed octopus monarch was still fleeing in a sorry state. More than half of the energy provided by the 9 WYRM elders at the cost of their lives surged into the woman's body with the help of the 9 heavens fire-gathering formation. A small portion was used to maintain the 9 heavens fire-gathering formation. Even though the sea of fire outside had dissipated, the 9-clawed octopus clan cultivators would find it difficult to break the 9 heavens fire-gathering formation from the outside. The fire dragons dancing in the sky made it impossible for the 9-clawed octopus monarch to escape. At that moment, it did not dare to transform into its true form. Otherwise, with its huge body, it would suffer even more attacks. However, even if it transformed into its human form and its body became much more agile, the 9-clawed octopus monarch was still surrounded by many fire dragons. It constantly had to face the attacks of the fire dragons and be on guard against the woman's powerful attacks that could be launched at any time. In the beginning, the 9-clawed octopus monarch was still able to resist the fire dragons and the woman's attacks with all its might. However, after an hour, its condition had clearly deteriorated and it became more and more difficult to resist. The 9-clawed octopus king was destined to be defeated in this battle after the WYRM elder sacrificed his life. Before the 9-clawed octopus monarch came, it actually thought that it might be defeated. However, it never expected that it would be in such a pathetic state and encounter with such great danger. Another hour passed, and the 9-clawed octopus king was too weak. It knew that it would die if it continued like this, so it thought of the life-saving secret method of its clan. After hesitating for a long time, the 9-clawed octopus king still could not find a better solution. It steeled its heart and stood still on the spot. Its body was quickly frozen by a layer of ink-blue ice crystals. The previously arrogant 9-clawed octopus king had turned into an ink-blue ice sculpture and maintained its human form. No matter how the fire dragons attacked, the statue was not damaged in the slightest, but it no longer displayed any power. It was obvious that the 9-clawed octopus king had used a special technique to seal itself. Furthermore, the seal had an extremely strong defensive power. The woman was furious that 9 of her clan's elders had died. She kept attacking the ice sculpture, but even though she was very strong now, she couldn't break the ice sculpture. She couldn't even leave a crack on it. The woman calmed down a little and used her power to wrap the ice sculpture. Then, she formed a hand seal and made a hole in the light screen of the 9 heavens fire-gathering array. However, the woman charged out alone and attacked the 9-clawed octopus clan cultivators outside. Countless fire dragons flew out of the woman's sleeves and pounced at the 9-clawed octopus clan cultivators. In an instant, the dark clouds were scattered, and the nine-clawed octopus clan cultivators died under the fire dragon's attack. Then, countless powerhouses of the Dragon Head clan charged out. Without the nine-clawed octopus king, the nine-clawed octopus clan army immediately collapsed and fled in all directions. Both the nine-clawed octopus clan and the Dragon Head clan had undoubtedly suffered heavy losses in this battle. Although the nine-clawed octopus clan was defeated and the nine-clawed octopus king was captured, the Dragon Head clan, which was not very strong to begin with, had also lost 9 Saint God elders. They were also greatly weakened. After the nine-clawed octopus clan army retreated, the woman stopped the Nine Heavens fire-gathering array and urged the other powerhouses of the clan to do their best to maintain the overall situation of the clan. In the end, the woman took the nine-clawed octopus king's ice sculpture back to the sacred temple. She used all sorts of methods but was unable to do anything to the ice sculpture, so her desire for revenge was dashed. Moreover, the woman was not in good condition. Maintaining the Nine Heavens fire-gathering array had already taken a great toll on her, and her cultivation was not very strong. In the end, she received the cultivation imparting from the 9 elders. Although it had greatly increased her strength, it had also damaged her cultivation. She had to quickly recuperate for a while. Humph. Don't think that I can't do anything to you. I'll let you have a taste of the heavenly fire in the heavenly coffin. As she spoke, the woman had already formed a seal and sent it into the 9 iron pillars around her. The 9 pillars then each released a beam of divine light that hit the wall opposite the door. After a moment of shaking, a crystal coffin appeared under the wall. Xiaoling Yu was still lying in the crystal coffin, still a bloody mess. The woman did not look at Xiaoling Yu. With a wave of her hand, the 9-clawed octopus king's ice sculpture was sent into the crystal coffin and stacked on top of Xiaoling Yu's body. The crystal coffin was then hidden again. The woman had no choice but to recuperate for a while. Even if she wanted to take revenge, she had to stabilize her condition first. Xiaoling Yu naturally did not know what was going on. However, he had already reached the final stage of tempering his body. Naturally, he could not stop because of the ice sculpture's appearance. Ignoring the ice sculpture, Xiaoling Yu continued to temper his body. However, to his surprise, the ice sculpture did not react at all under the burning of the brilliant white flames. Its quality was probably not inferior to an ordinary sacred artifact. The ice sculpture's lack of reaction was a good thing for Xiaoling Yu. At least his cultivation would not be affected. Another 200 years passed in a hurry. Xiaoling Yu finally finished tempering his body. The quality of his body should be much stronger than an ordinary sacred artifact. If sacred artifacts were divided into 3 grades, his body should be comparable to a high-grade sacred artifact. After finishing his cultivation, he focused his attention on the ink blue ice sculpture. Restricted by the flames in the crystal coffin, Xiaoling Yu could not see what was going on. He simply brought the ice sculpture into the primal chaos spectrum. This is definitely a kind of self-sealing. Perhaps it's just to resolve a temporary danger, the knowledgeable Miaowing said with certainty. It seems to be a human expert, but I feel that he has a demonic aura on him, Qing Xian said. He's not a human cultivator. He should be some kind of demonic beast in human form, Miaowing said. Xiaoling Yu and the others surrounded the ice sculpture and studied it. However, no matter how they studied it, they could not find anything useful. Left with no choice, Xiaoling Yu could only put the ice sculpture back into the crystal coffin. The woman had recuperated for 1,000 years before her condition stabilized. She, who was still far from a complete recovery, brought the crystal coffin out again. This time, after Xiaoling Yu discovered that the crystal coffin was trembling, he first released the ice sculpture. Before he could enter the crystal coffin was already exposed at the bottom of the wall, so he simply didn't go out. Huh. That human cultivator's body has been incinerated into nothingness? The woman was a little puzzled. Then why is his magic treasure gone? Could it be that his magic treasure's quality was not high and was also incinerated? However, that human cultivator had no enmity with the woman, so she did not care too much about him. At the moment, she was most concerned about the 9-clawed octopus king's ice sculpture. Nine-clawed evildoer, I'll let you have a taste of heavenly fire now. The woman returned to the futon and sat down. Then, she continuously formed various seals and sent them into the heavenly coffin. Suddenly, the brilliant white flames in the heavenly coffin seemed to have gone crazy. They burned fiercely and their power kept increasing. The woman kept forming seals and occasionally spat out a mouthful of essence blood. She seemed to be very serious. After an entire day, the surface of the ink blue ice sculpture finally emitted wisps of mist. The flames inside now have such a powerful power. It seems to be comparable to the brilliant white flames in the eight-legged Tai Chi cauldron. Shaolin Yu, who was in the chaos spectrum, looked at the ice sculpture in the crystal coffin in astonishment. The woman stopped casting spells, but the heavenly fire in the heavenly coffin maintained its power. The nine-clawed octopus king's ice sculpture was slowly melting. After burning for 10 years, the ice sculpture finally melted completely. The powerful flames had already burned the nine-clawed octopus king's body. Although the nine-clawed octopus king's body was strong, it was definitely not comparable to the layer of ice. Otherwise, it would not have sealed itself. Therefore, its body was quickly ignited and waves of mighty energy began to overflow. Should I save it? Shaolin Yu hesitated. In the end, he chose to put the nine-clawed octopus king into the chaos spectrum. In Shaolin Yu's opinion, the powerhouse who put himself in the crystal coffin must have bad intentions and could be considered his enemy. Shaolin Yu naturally had reason to believe that this self-sealed expert was also an enemy of the owner of the crystal coffin, since he had placed the self-sealed expert in the crystal coffin to be burned. Even if an enemy of an enemy could not become a friend, they might become temporary companions. The powerhouse who sealed himself must have a better understanding of the owner of the crystal coffin and might have a good way to leave the crystal coffin. The powerful flames released by the crystal coffin also attracted Shaolin Yu's attention. He felt that it would be very difficult for him to leave the crystal coffin. However, what made Shaolin Yu depressed was that although the powerhouse who sealed himself was invited into the chaos spectrum, there were no signs of him waking up. Shaolin Yu also could not extinguish the flames on his body. A large amount of pure divine power overflowed from the powerhouse who sealed himself. I want to save you, but I can't. You can't waste your energy. Shaolin Yu took out the black pearl and began to guide the energy overflowing from the powerhouse into the black pearl. The powerhouse's energy should be able to change the pearl, Shaolin Yu thought. Chapter 694. The nine-clawed octopus monarch's body had just begun to melt in the woman's eyes when it suddenly disappeared. She was extremely surprised. What's going on? It can't be burned into nothingness in an instant, right? The woman exclaimed with a doubtful look. She then cast a series of spells, but no matter what she did, the coffin remained empty. There must be a problem. The woman refused to believe that the nine-clawed octopus monarch's body had been burned into nothingness in an instant. She narrowed her eyes and said, "I'll burn you for a while longer. Let's see what tricks you can play." Perhaps because she was still worried, the woman cast another spell to increase the power of the heavenly fire in the coffin. The woman also refused to believe that the nine-clawed octopus monarch had already escaped from the coffin. She felt that the nine-clawed octopus monarch must have cast another spell to hide and trick her into opening the coffin. The woman was quite patient. She calmly sat on the square futon and calmed her heart to regulate her breathing. After 10 years in the chaos spectrum, the nine-clawed octopus monarch's body was completely incinerated. However, all of its essence energy had been absorbed by the black bead. Shaolin Yu did not know that the nine-clawed octopus monarch was an extremely powerful powerhouse. The nine-clawed octopus monarch's energy was naturally extremely dense. After absorbing the nine-clawed octopus monarch's energy, the oval-shaped black bead underwent a great change. The thin red line in the middle became thicker and the center of the red line occupied half of the entire black bead. At that moment, even Shaolin Yu would feel dizzy if he stared at the bead for 10 breaths. "It looks more like an eyeball now," Miaoling said with a frown. Shaolin Yu also had the same feeling. However, the bead did not reveal any dangerous aura, so he was rather relieved. There were no signs of the crystal coffin being opened. Xiaoling Yu did not dare act on his own and could only continue to wait in the chaos spectrum. When he had nothing to do, Xiaoling Yu would inject 30% of his divine power, blood essence, and soul power into the bead. He would then continue to inject them when he recovered. As he gradually lost his patience, he cast a spell and infused the soul power from the golden soul bead in his dantian into this round bead. The golden soul bead was left behind by the heaven-reaching realm expert who had been eaten alive in the city. Naturally, it contained a very strong spiritual energy. Just like that, thousands of years passed in the outside world, and tens of millions of years passed in the chaotic spectrum. Finally, there was a greater movement from the bead. After it absorbed the energy that Xiaoling Yu had poured into it again, it suddenly trembled slightly. Xiaoling Yu naturally noticed the commotion. He cautiously moved 300 feet away and stared at the bead cautiously. After looking at it for 2 breaths of time, he already felt dizzy and had no choice but to look away. Xiaoling Yu had just shifted her gaze when the black and red ball suddenly emitted a dazzling light. After the light shone, a shocking aura suddenly surged out. It actually pushed Xiaoling Yu, who was on full alert, back a few hundred feet away. Xiaoling Yu, who was extremely shocked, had just stabilized his body when he saw that there was a huge shadow where the bead was. The shadow was more than 10 feet tall, but it was in the shape of a human and looked very mighty. What surprised Xiaoling Yu the most was that the black bead was now in the middle of the shadow's eyebrows. It was like a vertical eye. The shadow's 3 eyes were staring at Xiaoling Yu. After a while, the vertical eye suddenly doubled in size. A bloody light with a destructive aura shot towards Xiaoling Yu. When the bloody light shot towards him, Xiaoling Yu actually felt that his entire body could not move. He also felt a sense of urgency as if he was about to be destroyed. In his heart, in his soul, and in the depths of his consciousness, there was a warning. Even Xiaoling Yu's body was trembling at this moment. Xiaoling Yu had never felt such a sense of danger even when he was attacked by a divine master from the dorsal fin clan. The attack brought about by the bloody light made Xiaoling Yu feel that he was definitely going to die. However, this was the space of the chaotic spectrum after all. When such a powerful attack was unleashed in the chaotic spectrum, it was blocked by the chaotic spectrum. The bloody light had only flown halfway when the space in its path was distorted. An invisible force weakened the power of the bloody light by more than half. However, even a small portion of the sanguine light still struck Xiaoling Yu's body. Even with the help of the chaos spectrum, Xiaoling Yu couldn't dodge it. He could only use his arm to block the sanguine light. The bloody light blasted onto Xiaoling Yu's arm. In an instant, his arm was blasted into countless pieces. Xiaoling Yu's body was also sent flying far away. After stabilizing himself, he was even more shocked and had a look of disbelief on his face. His arm was stronger than an ordinary divine weapon. However, it was so fragile under the attack of the bloody light. If he had been hit by the full power of the bloody light, wouldn't he have been killed immediately? Xiaoling Yu was secretly glad that he had caused the round bead to change in the chaotic spectrum. If he had been outside, he would have lost his life. Losing an arm was nothing. He could recover it with some time. However, if the vertical eye continued to attack him, he would be in danger. Fortunately, the vertical eye did not attack again. The tall human figure suddenly said, "If you can withstand the attack of the heavenly eye of destruction, you are qualified to obtain it." After saying this, the tall illusory figure suddenly disappeared, and the vertical eye quietly floated in the air. Xiaoling Yu observed and waited for a long time. When he saw that the vertical eye was no longer moving and that he no longer felt dizzy from staring at it, he was slightly relieved. The vertical eye had now returned to its original appearance when Xiaoling Yu first saw it. Most of it was black, but there was a thin red line in the middle. Xiaoling Yu gathered his courage and held the vertical eye in his hand. No matter how he looked at it, it did not seem to have changed much. That figure said that I am qualified to obtain it. How do I get it? Xiaoling Yu frowned and pondered. If he could obtain this treasure called the Heavenly Eye of Destruction, it would undoubtedly allow him to have another powerful attack method. this attack method was enough to threaten the existence of the divine master powerhouses. The reason why the vertical eye had returned to its original appearance was probably because the energy within it had been exhausted. Even if I take it for myself, it won't be easy to make it attack once. I've poured so much energy into it, and it has already returned to its original state after just one attack. With my current strength, even if I pour all the energy in my body into it at once, I'm afraid it won't be able to launch an attack like that again. Xiaoling Yu thought gloomily. Xiaoling Yu had many ways to make this vertical eye into a treasure that truly belonged to him. The simplest method was to drip blood on it to make it recognize him as its owner. A drop of essence blood fell on the surface of the vertical eye. Unsurprisingly, the vertical eye absorbed the essence blood as before. However, the drop of essence blood had just merged with the vertical eye for less than a breath's time. With a flash, it flew directly towards Xiaoling Yu's face. Xiaoling Yu did not have time to react. He felt a pain between his eyebrows, and then waves of tearing pain came from his head. Waves of strange and irresistible energy spread throughout his body from between his eyebrows. Even the soul in his sea of consciousness was no exception. After a few breaths, Xiaoling Yu fainted. In the coma, Xiaoling Yu's body was shining with bursts of red light. His body was still twitching constantly. And in between his eyebrows, a red vertical line slowly appeared. It was as fine as the red vertical line in the center of the black vertical eye, but it could be seen clearly. At this time, the three women who felt a big movement in the primal chaos spectrum rushed over. Seeing Xiaoling Yu like this, they were very worried, but no one acted rashly. After waiting for hundreds of years, the red light on Xiaoling Yu's body dissipated, and he gradually woke up. After waking up, he opened his eyes. Touching his eyebrows, Xiaoling Yu did not feel anything unusual. Then he said to the three women, "Don't worry, I'm fine. I should have gotten an opportunity." "What opportunity? Tell us quickly." Qing Xian asked curiously. "Ah, the bead that looks like an eyeball, it's called the Heavenly Eye of Destruction. It seems to have run into my eyebrows." Xiaoling Yu paused for a moment before replying. Heavenly Eye of Destruction. What a domineering name. Miaoling praised calmly. "Is it this red vertical line? Open it and let us see." Qing Xian said eagerly. "Ah," Xiaoling Yu paused again. He silently tried to open it, and said gloomily, "I can't open it now. It seems like it needs to store enough power to be effective." "Then why is your arm missing?" Qing Xian asked again. "It was destroyed by the red light of the Heavenly Eye of Destruction." Xiaoling Yu replied. Qing Xian and Miaoling began to talk intermittently. From start to finish, Linger remained silent and indifferent. Of course, Linger was also concerned about Xiaoling Yu. However, she could not be as obvious as Qing Xian and Miaoling. In the following days, Xiaoling Yu constantly tried to familiarize himself with the Eye of Destruction, but he didn't make any progress at all. Apart from being able to continuously pour his divine force, essence blood, and soul force into it, he couldn't do anything else. In his boredom, Xiaoling Yu took out the golden armored puppet that he also did not know where he got it from. The golden armored puppet had suffered some damage. Fortunately, the damage was not severe. Xiaoling Yu planned to refine it again. Xiaoling Yu did not know that the golden armored puppet was left behind by the immortal ascension expert he had given birth to in the siege. Since it was something that an immortal ascension expert relied heavily on, it was naturally extraordinary. Chapter 695. Perhaps it was because she needed too much time to recover or because she was very patient, but she did not look at the coffin again. Instead, she meditated quietly on the square cushion. Xiaoling Yu had studied the chaotic scroll for close to 1,000 years before comprehending the technique to refine the golden armored puppet. Afterwards, she used the primordial chaotic flames to refine the golden armored puppet. Naturally, she had to add some special materials during the process. The method to refine the puppet recorded in the jade slip was actually a little cruel. It involved capturing a living cultivator and using a secret technique to break down various materials of extremely high quality before fusing them into the cultivator's body. It would make the cultivator's body as tough as an enchanted treasure. The cultivator could not die during the entire process, or their body would collapse or their life essence would be lost, and the refinement would fail. As a result, the cultivator who was being refined would be tormented. Once all the materials fused with the cultivator's body, the cultivator's original consciousness would be erased, and some other memories would be poured into the cultivator's soul to create a very obedient puppet. Furthermore, the puppet's original realm would not be affected. However, a puppet refined in this way would have its body completely metallized. Its soul and nature would have changed, so it could no longer be considered alive. Even if one possessed extraordinary abilities, it would be impossible to revive or recover it. The golden armored puppet that Xiaoling Yu had obtained was of the same quality as the golden armor it wore. It was no weaker than regular saint artifacts, and its consciousness only contained the memories of various battle techniques. It was a powerful weapon of mass destruction. The golden armored puppet was not severely damaged. Xiaoling Yu did not lack saint artifact quality materials either. With the assistance of the refinement method, it was naturally very easy for her to recover. After all, it was not alive, so it would be fine even if she casually burned it with the primordial chaotic flames. The life essence and fleshly energy in its body had been completely sealed off by the various materials that had fused into its body. No matter how much damage it received, there would be no loss of life essence. After refining the golden armored puppet, Xiaoling Yu saw that the crystal coffin still showed no signs of opening, so she continued to meditate and cultivate. She comprehended the small words in the depths of her soul. At the same time, she poured energy into the vertical eye between her eyebrows. In his dantian, the chaotic divine infant was also releasing chaotic true fire at the same time, refining the chair and the extremely high-quality jade slip. What Xiaoling Yu did not expect was that the vertical eye between her eyebrows would no longer accept any more energy after she had injected nearly 100 times of energy into it. Furthermore, Xiaoling Yu felt that she could now open the vertical eye between her eyebrows and launch an attack. Every time Xiaoling Yu injected a third of the energy in his body into the vertical eye, this included primal chaos divine power, blood essence, and soul energy. The total amount of energy infused 100 times was more than 30 times Xiaoling Yu's total energy. Just as Xiaoling Yu expected, even if he poured all the energy in his body into it, it was still far from enough for the Heaven's Eye of Destruction to launch an attack. However, before being locked in the crystal coffin, Xiaoling Yu had injected energy into the vertical eye countless times. He had even injected all the energy in the nine-clawed octopus king and the soul energy in the golden soul bead left behind by the earth-reaching powerhouse into the Heaven's Eye of Destruction. Only then did it emit the red light of destruction once. Compared to the total amount of energy that Xiaoling Yu had injected into it, 30 times the energy in his body was nothing. In other words, it was much easier to launch the Heaven's Eye of Destruction than before. This might have something to do with the fact that the Heaven's Eye of Destruction had already recognized its master. However, Xiaoling Yu's Heaven's Eye of Destruction should have been sealed before. Most of the energy that he had injected into it before was used to break the seal and activate the Heaven's Eye of Destruction. In any case, it was a good thing for Xiaoling Yu that the Heaven's Eye of Destruction could launch an attack more easily than before. He did not need to think too much about this issue. Outputting 30 times the energy in Xiaoling Yu's body in one go would form an attack. Xiaoling Yu felt that even if it could not kill an earth-reaching powerhouse, it would be enough to seriously injure him. This kind of remarkable ability, in particular, was completely unknown to others. Launching it suddenly would be a very good sneak attack. Even an earth-reaching powerhouse might not have 30 times as much energy as Xiaoling Yu. In other words, an ordinary earth-reaching powerhouse might barely be able to launch an attack with the Heaven's Eye of Destruction. Xiaoling Yu had been comprehending the small characters on the light screen and the chaotic spectrum for many years. He could understand the meaning of every word and the meaning of many sentences. Xiaoling Yu had always been confused about the essence of a short paragraph or the whole passage, and the benefits and guidance it would provide for his cultivation. Every time, he felt that he had grasped something, but when he thought about it carefully, he realized that he had not grasped anything. He was just short of kicking the door, but he had repeatedly kicked the air. However, as long as he pierced through that thin layer of window paper, as long as he kicked the door, Xiaolingyu would be able to open a new world. It could be said that he had achieved the great perfection of the chaotic Great Enlightenment stage and had the strength to break through to the 9th transformation stage. Once I reach the 9th transformation stage, I should not be afraid of most earth-reaching powerhouses, right? With beautiful expectations, Xiaolingyu worked even harder in his cultivation. He read the contents of the small characters over and over again in his heart. Unfortunately, his comprehension was too average, and it was difficult for him to suddenly gain enlightenment. The woman in the Dragon Head tribe's sacred temple had waited for nearly 10,000 years this time. She once again invited the heavenly coffin out. What puzzled her was that the heavenly coffin was still empty. Could it be that the 9-clawed octopus king really used some heaven-defying secret technique to escape? The woman frowned. She had almost recovered. Although her realm had dropped a lot and her overall strength was less than half of what it used to be, this was her tribe's sacred temple after all. There was nothing for her to fear. If the 9-clawed octopus king had hidden itself, its strength would probably be much weaker than before after being burned by the heavenly fire for so many years. The woman did not continue to hesitate. She waved her hand and the heavenly coffin's lid opened. It was also at this moment that a figure suddenly flew out from the empty heavenly coffin. The woman's heart skipped a beat. She hurriedly took a few steps back and quickly formed a seal to send it into the surrounding large iron pillars. Before the 9 large iron pillars could react, the figure had already turned into a young cultivator. This young cultivator had a yellowish complexion and was not very tall. His body was well proportioned and strong. A pair of eyes were as bright as stars. There was a red vertical line between his thick and straight eyebrows. It was Xiaolingyu, who had come out of the chaotic spectrum. The woman relaxed a little when she saw that it was not the 9-clawed octopus king but the unconscious human cultivator who had been sent into the heavenly coffin. She did not let the 9 large iron pillars release the prepared attack. "Why are you here?" the woman asked curiously. Xiaolingyu could guess why the woman asked such a question. With a smile on his face, he cupped his fists in salute and replied, "Even if it was me, I was almost burned alive." As he spoke, Xiaolingyu's mind was highly focused. Once this woman showed signs of attacking, he would immediately hide in the primal chaos spectrum. "Since you're fine, you should know what happened to the person who went in later, right?" the woman asked with narrowed eyes. "He was burned to ashes," Xiaolingyu said straightforwardly. Xiaolingyu was very knowledgeable and had traveled to countless tribes. He was not surprised by the woman's strange appearance at all. At that moment, the woman sensed that the door of the sacred temple was being pulled. She opened the door with a wave of her hand and a holy deity expert of her tribe entered. After the holy deity elder entered, he only glanced at Xiaolingyu in surprise before sending a voice transmission to the woman. The woman frowned. She seemed very doubtful because the holy deity elder had said that the 9-clawed octopus clan had chosen a new 9-clawed octopus king. In other words, the 9-clawed octopus clan had confirmed that the original 9-clawed octopus king had died. Otherwise, they would not dare to choose a new octopus king. Could he really have been burned to ashes by the heavenly flames? The woman was still doubtful, but since the 9-clawed octopus king was dead and had probably died in the heavenly coffin, there was no need for her to think about anything else. "You're really an extraordinary person. You actually managed to survive the heavenly flames. You must be from Scirich Island, right?" asked the woman. "You can say that." Xiaolingyu nodded and said, "I don't think I have any enmity with your race. Why did you burn me in the heavenly flames?" The woman said directly, "You were unconscious in our territory and were sent here by our cultivators. They couldn't tell friend from foe, so they had no choice but to be cautious." Xiaolingyu did not pursue the matter. Instead, he asked, "Can I leave now?" "Of course," said the woman without hesitation. In the woman's opinion, this human expert's strength was unfathomable. Moreover, he was not afraid of the heavenly flames. He was definitely an extraordinary expert and should not be made an enemy of. The Nine-Clawed clan had just suffered a great calamity and had lost a great number of experts. As a prophet, she had suffered a great loss in cultivation as well. She was truly unable to go through another battle. After all, this human expert had no enmity with the Nine-Clawed clan. Since he did not mind being burned by the heavenly flames, why should the Nine-Clawed clan find trouble with him? The door of the sacred temple was wide open. Xiaoling Yu immediately walked towards the door. However, just as he reached the door, Xiaoling Yu looked back at the crystal coffin at the foot of the wall opposite the door. When Xiaoling Yu turned around, the woman immediately became nervous. She thought that Xiaoling Yu was interested in the clan's inheritance treasure. Xiaoling Yu only smiled and walked out of the door. He arrived at the plaza at the top of the main peak. Xiaoling Yu did not pay too much attention to the large metal pillar in the plaza. He immediately took out his tubular saint artifact. Before he could use greater teleportation, Xiaoling Yu turned around and said to the woman, "Can you give me a map of the nearby territory?" The woman seemed to be anxiously waiting for Xiaoling Yu to leave. She immediately tossed a jade slip to Xiaoling Yu. After catching the jade slip, Xiaoling Yu used his divine sense to look at it. Only then did he use greater teleportation to leave the Nine-Clawed clan in an instant. Chapter 696. We've finally arrived at Tongtiansane Island. Xiaoling Yu let out a long sigh of relief as he looked at the boundless mountain range before him. According to the jade slip given to him by the woman from the Flood Dragon clan, the Flood Dragon clan lived on a small island in the Tongtian Eastern Sea. The Tongtian Eastern Sea was actually a vast sea to the east of Tongtiansane Island. Tongtiansane Island was surrounded by boundless sea. There were countless islands in the four seas near Tongtiansane Island, and there were many clans like the Flood Dragon clan in the Divine Realm. Tongtiansane Island was an extremely large island, but it was completely covered by tall mountains and dense forests. Moreover, there were many powerful and violent ferocious beasts roaming around. Occasionally, one could even see the silhouettes of ancient beasts. Therefore, Tongtiansane Island was not suitable for clans to live in groups. It was very difficult for the weak to survive for long on Tongtiansane Island. Even omnipotent powerhouses had to be careful on Skirichsane Island, and they couldn't act recklessly. Although Tongtiansane Island was a dangerous place, the divine energy there was extremely dense. It was a holy land for cultivation. However, this holy land only belonged to the experts of the Divine Realm. It was not that the experts did not allow the weak to cultivate here, but that the weak could not gain a foothold here. Due to the influence of the divine energy in Tongtiansane Island, the four seas around Tongtiansane Island were also much denser than other places in the Divine Realm. Therefore, there were countless clans gathered on the islands and under the sea. The overall strength of these clans was higher than other places in the Divine Realm due to their superior cultivation conditions. In order to gain a foothold in the four seas around Tongtiansane Island, or to fight for better cultivation grounds, countless clans constantly waged wars. As a result, the sea water around Tongtiansane Island was often dyed red, and the smell of blood could often be smelled in the sea breeze. In other places in the Divine Realm, a clan that could find a dozen or so saint gods was considered very powerful. However, in the four seas around Tongtiansane Island, there were many clans with more than 10 saint gods. Many powerful clans had dozens of saint gods, and even clans like the Nine-Clawed Octopus clan had Tongtian experts. The jade slip that the woman from the Flood Dragon race had given him only contained a map of the Heavenspan Eastern Sea. As for the Heavenspan Sane Island, it only contained the coastline to the east of the island. There was nothing beyond that. The most important thing for Xiaoling Yu to come to Tongtiansane Island was to find Anya. As his understanding of the Divine Realm and Tongtiansane Island increased, he knew that if he wanted to advance to the 9th transformation, he would have to find an opportunity in Tongtiansane Island. The materials needed to advance to the 9th revolution were mostly saint rank. The most important main material was even rarer. It could only be found in a place like Heavenly Saint Island. Shaolin Yu's cheap master was also considered a genius back then. The reason why he failed to break through to the 9th refinement stage was firstly because he was still a little lacking in his own realm, and secondly, because the external conditions were not sufficiently prepared. None of Shaolin Yu's ancestors had broken through to 9th transformation stage, so they naturally did not have any successful experiences to learn from. Shaolin Yu had to prepare as much as possible. Another important thing was that Shaolin Yu knew that Tongtian Saint Island had a secret that led to a higher level of cultivation. If he wanted to go to a higher level of cultivation space, he would have to go to Heavenly Saint Island. As for why, Shaolin Yu still didn't know. Shaolin Yu hoped to meet many powerful people from Earth who were cultivating on Tongtian Saint Island. He wanted to experience the power of the powerful people from the divine realm on Earth. Back in the day, it was the ancient powerful people from Earth. They defeated countless races and forced everyone to agree to divide the realms. That was how the cultivation world, the 3 realms of immortals, demons, and the divine realm came into existence. Presumably, the powerhouses of Earth on the Heavenly Saint Island should be awe-inspiring and respected by all races. The divine power here is so dense. Of course, it will nurture many powerful people. Shaolin Yu could not help but exclaim as he looked at the divine power mist between the mountains. Then, he flew into the depths of Tongtian Saint Island. After flying for less than an hour, Shaolin Yu was stopped by a huge black condor. The black condor was like a black cloud that covered the sky. Its sharp eyes stared at Shaolin Yu with a diameter of 10 feet. The condor's wings seemed to be flapping slowly, but every time it flapped, it would cause the space of the divine realm to fluctuate and stir up gusts of wind. Just from the condor's aura, one could tell that it was at the holy god stage. Tongtian Saint Island is really not an ordinary place. I can see a holy god after flying for a short distance. Shaolin Yu was amazed, but he was not afraid at all. After the black condor stopped Shaolin Yu, it flapped its wings and 2 whirlwinds swept out. The 2 whirlwinds were like 2 long dragons. As soon as they appeared, they arrived beside Shaolin Yu and squeezed toward him from both sides. Shaolin Yu only snorted coldly. He did not release any aura, nor did he do anything to defend himself. He allowed the 2 whirlwinds to rub and squeeze against him. To Shaolin Yu's surprise, the black condor saw that its attack was ineffective and turned around to fly away without thinking. Shaolin Yu was not familiar with the situation on Tongtian Saint Island, so he did not want to cause any trouble. Since the black condor had retreated, there was no need for him to chase after it. When the black condor disappeared into the horizon, Shaolin Yu shook his head and smiled. He continued to fly. In the next 3 months, Shaolin Yu didn't know how far he had flown, but in such a short period of time, he had encountered more than a dozen Saint God vicious beasts. Many of them were grotesquely shaped, and he couldn't tell what species they were. Everywhere he passed by during these 3 months was like a primitive mountain forest. The primitive aura was very strong here, making Shaolin Yu feel as if he had returned to the wilderness. As he gradually went deeper into Tongtian Saint Island, the frequency of Shaolin Yu encountering vicious beasts increased. He did not dare to fly in the air so obviously anymore. After flying around Heavenspan Saint Island for so long, he realized that flying around Heavenspan Saint Island for such a long time was actually very dangerous. It was too eye-catching, and if he encountered a Heavenspan expert, it was very likely that it would cause a lot of trouble. Landing from the air, Shaolin Yu invited Foodie out and let it carry him forward. Foodie had cultivated in the primal chaos spectrum for many years. Now, it was almost at the peak of the late holy god stage. Its body had also undergone more obvious changes. Now, Foodie was only 10 feet long and less than 4 feet tall. Although it was very thin compared to many giant beasts, whether it was the quality of its body, its speed, or the level of its cultivation, Foodie was not inferior to any divine beast at the peak of the late holy god stage. After flying for another 2 months, Shaolin Yu suddenly saw a small courtyard on a flat ground under a waterfall. There was a crooked old tree planted in the small courtyard. There were also 3 thatched cottages and a small medicinal field on the flat ground of the courtyard. The strange thing was that when Xiaoling Yu walked to within 300 feet of the small courtyard suddenly moved more than a foot away. Because the small courtyard did not move very far, Xiaoling Yu thought that he had seen wrongly. However, when he took another step forward, the small courtyard actually moved more than a foot away. A foot away, which was one step away from Xiaoling Yu. After trying a few more times, Xiaoling Yu was shocked to find that no matter how far he walked, the small courtyard maintained a distance of 300 feet from him. Even if he suddenly accelerated forward, the small courtyard maintained the same speed as him. It was always 300 feet away from him. Xiaoling Yu felt that it was very strange. He continued to accelerate toward the small courtyard. However, even if he increased his speed to the maximum, he could not catch up to the small courtyard. What was even stranger was that no matter where the small courtyard went, it would become a flat ground. There must be a demon behind this abnormality. Xiaoling Yu felt that the small courtyard was too strange. He immediately turned around and stopped chasing. Unexpectedly, the small courtyard seemed to be going all out with Xiaoling Yu. It actually turned around and chased after Xiaoling Yu. The small courtyard obviously had a very fast-moving speed. It was definitely faster than Xiaoling Yu. It seemed to be chasing relentlessly, but it still maintained a distance of 300 feet from Xiaoling Yu. When Xiaoling Yu saw that he was unable to break free, he immediately hid in the primal chaos spectrum. Through a door of light in the primal chaos spectrum, Xiaoling Yu looked at the courtyard and thought to himself, "Let's see what tricks you can play." After waiting for about 3 breaths of time, the small courtyard slowly moved over and stopped at the location of the primal chaos spectrum. However, to Xiaoling Yu's surprise, the small courtyard actually stopped moving and stopped at the place where the primal chaos spectrum was hidden. The courtyard was very quiet. No cultivators entered or left. The doors of the 3 thatched cottages were also closed. I'm actually trapped in the primal chaos spectrum again. What is this small courtyard? It seems to have eyes. If I go out like this, there will definitely be an unforeseen event. Xiaoling Yu was at a loss. He did not know if he should go out or wait. In addition, the flow of time in the primal chaos spectrum was relatively fast. A year outside was 10,000 years inside. Without enough patience, ordinary cultivators would not be able to stay in the primal chaos spectrum. Xiaoling Yu was still considered patient. For the sake of safety, he resisted the idea of going out and decided to wait for a while more. However, for some reason, the small courtyard stayed in place and did not move. Xiaoling Yu sat cross-legged at the door of light and began to meditate on the small words. Occasionally, he would look outside. 100 years had passed outside, but 1,000,000 years had passed in the primal chaos spectrum. The small courtyard still did not move. 3,000 years had passed outside, but Xiaoling Yu was still blocked by the thin layer of window paper. Chapter 697. The old man held a palm leaf fan that was more than a foot long and leisurely walked into the courtyard. He came to the crooked tree and with a wave of his fan, a stone stool and a small round stone table appeared under the tree. The old man sat on the stone stool and swept his loose sleeves across the stone table. A wine pot and a large wine bowl appeared on the stone table. However, just as the old man filled the wine bowl with wine, the small courtyard suddenly changed shape. In an instant, it turned into a fierce tiger-like monster beast. The fierce tiger was the size of an ox and its body was black and white. Most of its fur was white, while the black parts were circles and some black spots. At this moment, the monster beast's 2 front paws quickly picked up the wine bowl and poured the wine into its mouth. However, just as the wine entered its mouth, the tiger-like monster beast spat it out again and stuck out its tongue. Its 2 front paws were constantly fanning in front of its mouth. Its appearance was very intelligent and very comical. "Ha, you beast, you're just greedy. You've suffered a loss this time." The old man laughed loudly and patted the tiger's head with his palm leaf fan. He said proudly, "I won this wine from your master. What's lamentable is that guy thinks he's smart. Last time, he made a bet with me and lost you to me. This time, he lost again. Originally, he lost a pot of great freedom spiritual holy wine, but that guy actually gave me a pot of bitter wine with ill intentions. This time, I pour a bowl for you to drink. Your master's bitter wine, come and taste it, wonderful, wonderful. The tiger monster beast had a dejected look on its face as it crawled down sullenly. However, it soon stood up and said a few words to the old man. Oh? After the old man heard this, his expression changed slightly. He narrowed his eyes and looked around. Don't try to fool this old man. How can there be a human expert here? The old man looked around seriously for a while before patting the tiger's head with his palm leaf fan again. The ferocious tiger looked very aggrieved. It mumbled a few words as if it was seeking redress for its grievances. You and your black-hearted and cunning master are the same. You only know how to lie and deceive people all day long. Even your master is honest in front of me, but you bastard came to lie to me. If there were other experts hiding here, how could they hide from this old man's eyes? The old man replied indifferently. The ferocious tiger didn't dare to say anything more. It immediately ran to the side and fell asleep on a large bluestone. The old man didn't pour any more wine for himself. He just sat there with a leisurely look on his face. He didn't cultivate or do anything else. A few hours later, the ferocious tiger that was sleeping on the large green rock suddenly woke up and raised its head to look at the forest in the distance. The old man didn't do anything else, but the smile on his face became even wider. Not long after, a middle-aged cultivator wearing a black robe and a strange hat slowly walked over in the air. The middle-aged cultivator looked a little thin and weak. His eyebrows were thick and his eyes weren't big, but his eyes were very black and bright. In addition, there was a tuft of beard on both sides of his mouth and chin, making him look very intelligent. Before he even got close, the ferocious tiger had already gone up to him with a pitiful look on its face. You bastard, you still remember old times. He already lost you to me, but you still miss him. Although I don't treat you well, I won't lose you. The old man scolded in annoyance. The middle-aged cultivator gently patted the ferocious tiger's head. There was a little love, a little reluctance, a little guilt. In short, his expression was complicated. Brother Barefoot, why do you have to compete with a bastard? What's more, it already belongs to you. You have to treat it well. The middle-aged cultivator slowly descended. With a wave of his sleeve, he made a stone stool for himself to sit on. What use do I have for it? Apart from some camouflage techniques, what other abilities does it have? It looks very powerful, but last time I brought it to the Wise King's residence, it didn't even dare to come within 300 feet of the Wise King's residence. It's as timid as a mouse, it won't be able to achieve anything great. The old man said with disdain. Since you don't like it, why don't you return it to me? Otherwise, you'll be annoyed. The middle-aged cultivator put on a considerate expression. Don't give me that. If I lose and you want it back, wouldn't I have one for nothing? The old man waved his hand and said, That's right, I clearly won this time with the spirit communication holy brew. Why did you give me a pot of bitter wine? The middle-aged cultivator asked, Have you drunk it, brother? The old man shook his head and pointed at the ferocious tiger. I haven't drunk it, but it poured a big bowl for itself. The middle-aged cultivator suddenly stood up, looking very angry. However, when he remembered that he had purposely given the bitter wine to the old man, he sat back down resentfully. In the blink of an eye, the middle-aged cultivator put on a smile and said, I'm here today to explain this matter. When you and I were drinking together, I drank too much and got a little drunk. That's why I took the wrong wine. I was afraid that brother would drink the bitter wine by mistake, so I chased after you day and night. The old man knew the middle-aged cultivator's temperament, so he didn't pursue the matter. After taking back the pot of spirit communication holy brew, he pointed at the ferocious tiger and said, Brother Shin, do you want to take back your beloved pet? Hearing this, the middle-aged cultivator immediately became spirited. However, he quickly returned to his normal expression and said indifferently, How can I take back something I've lost? I'm not the kind of person who can't afford to lose. Even if you want to go back on your word, I have to agree first. You have to agree to a condition of mine. The old man said with a smile. What condition? Tell me first. The middle-aged cultivator said cautiously. Help me steal a holy laurel fruit from Moon Mountain. The old man said. What? Old man, you're too greedy. The middle-aged cultivator glared at him and said, that laurel tree is that beauty's treasure. If I were to be caught stealing it, even if that beauty couldn't do anything to me, if her husband were to find out, that sun-shooting bow of his might aim at me. Aren't you asking me to court death? The old man didn't care and said, how can there be so many ifs? You just have to be careful. With your ability, not to mention a holy laurel fruit, even if you steal the rabbit, you won't be found out. Besides, even if you are found out, her husband won't dare to use the sun-shooting bow on you. After all, he has to give your master some face. The middle-aged cultivator waved his hand and said, my master has ascended for so many years. That boorish man might not give my master face. Besides, that boorish man hates people who sneak into Moon Mountain. The old man said, I don't care. Anyway, if you want this animal to return to your side, you have to steal a holy laurel fruit for me. The middle-aged cultivator hesitated, but still said firmly, I won't do it. The old man pondered for a moment and said as if he had made a painful decision, how about this, besides returning this animal, I'll treat you to 3 jugs of Xuanji wine. How about it? Hearing the words Xuanji wine, the middle-aged cultivator was moved and asked, really? The old man snorted and said, I'm not like you who likes to swindle people everywhere. If you don't believe me, you can drink these 3 jugs of Xuanji wine in front of me right now. There were 3 jugs of wine on the stone table at this time. The middle-aged cultivator rolled his eyes and finally said, let me try first to see if this is Xuanji wine. The old man didn't refuse. The middle-aged cultivator opened 1 jug and took a big gulp, then tasted the wine in the other 2 jugs and said with satisfaction, it really is Xuanji wine. How about it? Are you going to Moon Mountain? The old man asked. I'll try it again. Don't you dare try anything funny. With that, the middle-aged cultivator picked up 3 more jugs and took 3 big gulps. At this time, the middle-aged cultivator was already showing signs of drunkenness. He didn't ask the old man any more and took a jug of wine and poured it down his throat. It seemed that he liked this wine very much. After drinking 1 jug, the middle-aged cultivator was clearly drunk, but he still took another jug and pushed the last one to the old man, saying, come, let's drink. Wait, about Moon Mountain. Don't worry, leave it to me. It's just a holy laurel fruit. Even if you want a laurel tree, I'll cut it down for you. Then, the old man and the middle-aged cultivator finished the rest of the wine. After the 3 jugs of Xuanji wine were finished, the middle-aged cultivator and the old man didn't seem to be satisfied. They took out more wine and continued to drink until they were both drunk. The ferocious tiger, on the other hand, secretly poured the remaining wine on the stone table into its stomach. Soon after, it became drunk as well. After waiting for a long time, Shaolin Yu saw that the 2 cultivators and the tiger didn't show any signs of waking up. Then, he quietly left the Primal Chaos catalog and quickly flew away. The moment Shaolin Yu left, the old man and the middle-aged cultivator suddenly opened their eyes, but then closed them again. Shaolin Yu naturally didn't dare to use greater teleportation on this dangerous Skirich Island. Fortunately, his speed wasn't slow either, and he quickly left the place he had stopped at. After traveling at full speed for 3 months, Shaolin Yu finally slowed down. He felt that he should be safe. Along the way, in order to travel as far as possible, he met with any beasts or monsters that blocked his way. He directly charged through them and didn't stop to waste time fighting. What Shaolin Yu didn't expect was that even after traveling at full speed for 3 months, he was still caught. One day, 3 months later, Shaolin Yu was slowly advancing when he suddenly sensed that someone was following behind him. He immediately cried out in alarm. Fellow Taoist, please wait. Before he could turn around, the other party's voice sounded. Xiaoling Yu hesitated for a moment, but didn't hide in the Primal Chaos catalog. Instead, he turned around. At this moment, the middle-aged cultivator who had passed out earlier was slowly approaching on the back of the tiger. The middle-aged cultivator's face was filled with a warm and sincere smile. Xiaoling Yu braced himself and cupped his fists in salute. Is something the matter? Chapter 698. Beautiful. Fellow Taoist, I don't know you and we don't have any friendship. Why would fellow Taoist think of me? Xiaoling Yu obviously didn't believe him. Have you heard of Moon Mountain? The middle-aged cultivator on the tiger asked. I've never heard of it. Xiaoling Yu shook his head. You've never heard of Moon Mountain? The tiger-riding cultivator was astonished and asked, could it be that fellow Taoist has just arrived at Heaven-Span Saint Island? Xiaoling Yu nodded. I see. No wonder you don't know about Moon Mountain. The tiger-riding cultivator had a look of understanding. Then, he used his hand to stroke the tuft of beard on his chin and said, Moon Mountain is a good place. Many powerhouses of Heavenly Saint Island will visit it out of admiration. Especially newcomers like you, fellow Taoist. If you don't go to Moon Mountain, it will definitely be a great loss. Oh? Is there a secret behind it? Xiaoling Yu asked, puzzled. There is a secret behind it, a secret behind it. You'll know if you follow me to Moon Mountain. The cultivator on the tiger said vaguely. Xiaoling Yu nodded again, but he said, I'll definitely go and take a look in the future. However, I have other things to do recently, so I won't be following you. Thank you for your kindness. After saying that, Xiaoling Yu turned to leave. Fellow Taoist, please wait. The cultivator on the tiger called out softly. He rode the tiger to the front and said, I'm a very warm-hearted person. Not only do I like to make new friends, but I also like to help others. Fellow Taoist, you must have something to do in Heavenly Saint Island. However, since you're new here, you don't know much about Heavenly Saint Island. Why don't I lead the way and help you? One who is unaccountably solicitous is hiding evil intentions. Xiaoling Yu knew this, so he was naturally on guard when the cultivator on the tiger was so enthusiastic. However, Xiaoling Yu didn't feel any malice from the cultivator on the tiger. Moreover, he was smiling and didn't seem to have any ulterior motives. As the saying goes, don't slap a smiling face. Since the other party was so enthusiastic, Xiaoling Yu would seem too cold if she rejected. So be it. In any case, Xiaoling Yu would rather this tiger-riding cultivator be unhappy than allow him to follow her. What I want to do is not difficult. I don't need your help. I dare not trouble you, fellow Taoist. Xiaoling Yu politely declined. Don't mention it. Your business is my business. I'm very free these days. Don't be so courteous with me. The tiger-riding cultivator looked very forthright and righteous, but then he said, May I ask how I should address you? When Xiaoling Yu heard the other party's name, he was immediately taken aback. However, with his current calm state of mind, he did not reveal too much of a surprise. He only said indifferently, My surname is Xiao. Xiaoling Yu's surprise was seen by Shengongbao. He thought to himself, this guy seems to have heard of my name. Could it be that he has also heard the rumors of those who like to slander me? If so, I'm afraid he has not just arrived at Tongtian Holy Island. After pondering for a while, Shengongbao said with a smile, Brother Xiao, Tongtian Holy Island is full of dangers. It's not safe to travel alone. With me leading the way, you will not only avoid detours, but also have someone to look after you. Xiaoling Yu was determined not to travel with such a powerful cultivator who was not related to him. However, after hearing the other party's name, he changed his mind and said with a smile, Then I'll have to trouble you, fellow Taoist Chen. Shengongbao was also a little surprised by Xiaoling Yu's sudden change of mind. He thought that he would have to waste a lot of saliva. However, since the other party had agreed, he naturally would not ask why he suddenly changed his mind. He immediately changed the topic and asked, Where are you going? What are you doing? Xiaoling Yu thought for a while and said, I'm looking for someone. Shin Gongbao frowned slightly and said, then you should know who you are looking for and where he is, right? Xiaoling Yu shook his head and replied, I know who I'm looking for, but I can't say his name or where he is. Shin Gongbao said, how are you going to find him? Try your luck? Xiaoling Yu replied as he walked slowly, I know he is a divine master, and an expert swordsman. Shin Gongbao frowned even more and said, there are many divine master swordsmen on Tongtian Holy Island. Brother Xiao, can you describe him in more detail? For example, what does he look like and what kind of swordsmanship he cultivates? Xiaoling Yu pondered for a while and waved his hand. He condensed the image of an old man with his chaotic divine power and said, he looks like this. He should be cultivating the heaven sword skill. Shin Gongbao took a look and his expression changed drastically. He said, that old lunatic Saber 9, why are you looking for him? Xiaoling Yu asked in surprise, do you know this person, Brother Shen? Shin Gongbao nodded and said, Saber 9, the 9th disciple of the Sword Master. He is now recognized as one of the top 3 experts on Tongtian Holy Island. He's so strong? Xiaoling Yu's brows were knitted together in an instant. Why are you looking for that old lunatic? He is one of the most untouchable existences on Tongtian Holy Island. Shin Gongbao tilted his head and asked. I'm going to fight him to the death. When the time comes, you must help me. Xiaoling Yu pretended to be serious and said. No way. Shin Gongbao looked very surprised. He rolled his eyes and said, Brother, you must be joking. Fighting that old man is no different from seeking death. He is already at the peak of the late stage of Tongtian Holy Island. When he was at the 8th level of the Heaven Sword skill, he was already ranked among the top 20 on Tongtian Holy Island. Now he has broken through to the 9th level and has 1 foot in the immortal level. Although he is currently ranked among the top 3 on Tongtian Holy Island, the experts who are ranked among the top 3 like him may not be his match. Brother Shin, are you not willing to help? Xiaoling Yu asked again. This, that, Shin Gongbao stammered, looking very troubled. After a while, he suddenly asked, Brother Xiao, is there something that you can't get over? Xiaoling Yu was puzzled and said, what can I get over? At my current level, what else can I get over? Shin Gongbao immediately answered in a bad mood, since there's nothing to get over, why are you in such a hurry to seek death? Brother Xiao, even if you're going to seek death, you should find somewhere else. At least I can help you collect your corpse. Shin Gongbao's courage was as small as the legends said. It's fine if you don't want to help. This matter is not urgent. I still have something to do. Perhaps Brother Shin can help me with this, Xiaoling Yu continued. Shin Gongbao's expression softened slightly, and a smile returned to his face. He asked, as long as it's not fighting with the top 10 freaks, I can help with anything else. Xiaoling Yu said, I heard that there's an organization called the Sacred Army on Tongtian Holy Island. There's a Tongtian powerhouse who has a grudge against me. I'm going to seek revenge on that guy. Shin Gongbao's expression turned gloomy again. He rolled his eyes and said, offending the Sacred Army is almost the same as offending that old lunatic Saber 9. The Tongtian powerhouses of the Sacred Army never act alone on Tongtian Holy Island. Most of the time, they gather at the so-called Sacred Mountain. Barging into the Sacred Mountain is the same as fighting with Saber 9. Even the top 10 powerhouses may not be able to escape unscathed. Xiaoling Yu could not help but ask curiously, what's your ranking on Tongtian Holy Island, Brother Shin? Shin Gongbao laughed awkwardly and said, I'm barely in the top 5. Oh no, the top 30. Xiaoling Yu gave him a thumbs up and said, so Brother Shin is a real powerhouse on Tongtian Holy Island. I'll have to rely on Brother Shin's guidance in the future. In fact, Shin Gongbao knew that his ability could only be ranked in the top 50, and it was a little difficult. You flatter me, you flatter me. I don't deserve your guidance, but I should be able to give you some help. Shin Gongbao no longer dared to take on everything on his own. Neither of the 2 things Xiao Daoyu of unknown origins had mentioned were simple. Shin Gongbao was truly intimidated. This kid isn't trying to scare me on purpose, is he? Shin Gongbao mumbled to himself. Looking for Saber 9 is suicide, and seeking revenge in the Holy Army is suicide. In that case, there's only one thing left for me to do, Shaolin Yu mumbled to himself. What is it? Shin Gongbao's interest was piqued. Collect some saint-grade materials, such as the demonic blood heavenly Ganoderma, the spirit-suppressing aura-nurturing herb. Shaolin Yu listed close to 100 materials in one go. None of them were saint-grade, and none of them were easy to obtain. Shin Gongbao was stunned as he listened. His expression kept changing, and he thought to himself, this kid has quite a big appetite. After Shaolin Yu was done, Shin Gongbao said generously, I have more than 10 of the materials that Brother Xiao mentioned. I can help you purchase some from other places. However, I've never heard of a few of them, so I reckon they won't be easy to find. Shaolin Yu smiled and said, there's no rush. Take your time to collect them. Shin Gongbao breathed a sigh of relief. He immediately took out all the materials that he possessed and was willing to part with and handed them over to Shaolin Yu. I don't want to take fellow Taoists things for free. Although Shaolin Yu said this, he still accepted the materials without hesitation. What's there to feel bad about? You don't have to be courteous with me. Just take them. Shin Gongbao pretended to be very generous at first, then said, since you have nothing else to do now, why don't you come with me to Moon Mountain? Shaolin Yu naturally could not refuse like before, having just received benefits from Shin Gongbao. Moreover, he also wanted to learn more about Tongtian Holy Island and the powerhouses on Earth from Shin Gongbao, so he nodded and said, then I'll have to trouble you to lead the way. When Shin Gongbao saw that Shaolin Yu had agreed, he could not hide his joy. He immediately changed direction and led Shaolin Yu for a while, then said, you must have a treasure that can completely conceal your aura and tracks, don't you? Shaolin Yu shook his head and said, no. Chapter 699. I really don't have a magic weapon that can completely hide my aura and tracks. Shaolin Yu looked very certain. If you don't have such a magic weapon, how can you hide beside that barefoot old man without being discovered? He is a little stronger than me, especially in terms of cultivation. It's impossible for ordinary practitioners to get close to him without being discovered, Shin Gongbao said with a smile. Shaolin Yu knew that Shin Gongbao was referring to the chaotic spectrum. The chaotic spectrum could indeed hide one's body, but once one entered it, one could not move, so it was very difficult to use. What's more, the existence of the chaotic spectrum could not be easily known to others, especially a glib-tongued and cunning person like Shin Gongbao. Shaolin Yu had seen a lot of people, so he knew that people like Shin Gongbao were hypocritical. On the surface, they called you brother and were very friendly, but they might backstab you at any time. According to the ancient books on Earth, Shin Gongbao was a guy who cheated countless people and had a bad reputation. Even if there were some discrepancies in those records, it was probably not groundless. Although they were all strong practitioners on Earth, not all of them were worthy of deep friendship. Brother, do you know the holy laurel fruit? Shin Gongbao asked again when he saw that Shaolin Yu was silent. I don't know, Shaolin Yu said, shaking his head. The holy laurel fruit is actually on the laurel tree on Moon Mountain. The laurel tree blossoms every 10 billion years and bears fruit after another 10 billion years. The holy laurel fruit contains the essence of heaven and earth. Eating one can strengthen the connection between heaven and earth and the great way of heaven and earth. It allows the practitioner to communicate with heaven and earth more easily and borrow the power of the universe. In short, there are many benefits. The most important thing is that some of the materials you lack are very difficult to find, but they can be replaced by the holy laurel fruit. After all, the holy laurel fruit has a very comprehensive effect, Shin Gongbao said temptingly. Since there are so many benefits, I'm afraid it's not easy to get, right? Shaolin Yu said calmly. Of course. Good things aren't easy to get. Shin Gongbao nodded and said, there is a beautiful woman on the moon whose strength is about the same as mine. She is the owner of the laurel tree. As long as we can avoid her divine thoughts, we can easily steal a few. In order to make Shaolin Yu believe him, Shin Gongbao even boasted shamelessly, I once secretly took 2 holy laurel fruits from the Moon Mountain. Xiaoling Yu asked, since fellow Taoist Chen has had successful experience, why do you need to find a Dharma treasure that can completely conceal your tracks? Shingongbao pretended to be depressed and said, alas, it is because I have 2 successful precedents that the beautiful woman is more alert. If I use the previous method again, it will be impossible for me to get what I want. Xiaoling Yu suggested, if there's really only that beautiful woman on the Moon Mountain, fellow Taoist Chen can go and hold her back while I steal the holy laurel fruit. How does that sound? Shingongbao's expression changed, and his eyes rolled. Finally, he nodded and said, that's a good idea. Xiaoling Yu cursed in his heart, damn it. If there's really only one beautiful woman on the Moon Mountain, she must be very powerful. Otherwise, how could she protect the laurel tree? If the beautiful woman's strength is only a little stronger than Shingongbao, then there must be someone more powerful on the Moon Mountain. Anyway, Xiaoling Yu did not dare to believe most of Shingongbao's words. He did not want to be the kind of unlucky person who would be unlucky just because he said, fellow Taoist, please wait a moment. However, as Shingongbao said, if he could get a holy laurel fruit, Xiaoling Yu could really save a lot of trouble. A holy laurel fruit could replace many kinds of materials that Xiaoling Yu needed. Since Shingongbao was so interested in the holy laurel fruit, even if it was not as useful as Shingongbao had said before, it was probably not an ordinary fruit. Therefore, Xiaoling Yu still had to go to the Moon Mountain to have a look. If there was really an irresistible danger on the Moon Mountain, with Shingongbao's timid character, he would definitely not go. Brother Xiao, why don't you sit on the back of my black spot tiger? It runs very fast, Shingongbao suggested. Before Xiaoling Yu could answer, the black spot tiger growled in a low voice, seeming to be a little dissatisfied. Xiaoling Yu smiled and said, I also have a ride. As he spoke, Xiaoling Yu invited the foodie out and sat cross-legged on its back. The foodie was slightly bigger than the black spot tiger, but the black spot tiger waved its claws provocatively at the foodie and raised its head high. The black spot tiger must have felt that the foodie was not in the heavenly arrival realm. Although its cultivation was weaker, the foodie was not afraid of the black spot tiger, but it also ignored the black spot tiger's provocation and looked indifferent. Shingongbao naturally would not invite Xiaoling Yu to sit on the black spot tiger's back, so he immediately asked the black spot tiger to speed up. The black spot tiger looked down on the foodie and deliberately wanted to show off its strength. It kept accelerating, wanting to show its absolute advantage in speed. However, the foodie was not slow either. Although it could not surpass the black spot tiger, it would not be left behind. The black spot tiger gradually found that no matter how it accelerated, it could not widen the distance between them, which made it very unhappy. After all, it was in a higher realm than the foodie. Shingongbao was also secretly surprised and looked at the foodie a few more times. Along the way, Shingongbao and Xiaoling Yu naturally chatted a lot. Shingongbao wanted to find out Xiaoling Yu's background, while Xiaoling Yu wanted to know more useful information. Both of them were not stupid and kept their mouths shut. In addition, both of them were wary of each other. Naturally, neither of them could expect to get too much useful information from the other. Especially Shingongbao, who was born to lie and exaggerate. Even if he told the truth, Xiaoling Yu might not dare to believe him. The two of them rode on their respective mounts and traveled for nearly 20 years, crossing thousands of mountains and rivers. Shingongbao's black spot tiger finally stopped in front of a large river. What's wrong, are we almost there? Xiaoling Yu asked. Shingongbao shook his head and said, in front of us is the Peacock Bright King's territory. I'm thinking about whether to take a detour or sneak over quietly. Xiaoling Yu said, if you are not on good terms with the Peacock Bright King, it's naturally more appropriate to take a detour. In Xiaoling Yu's view, the Peacock Bright King's strength was definitely much stronger than Shingongbao. But if we take a detour, we'll have to travel for hundreds of years longer, Shingongbao said reluctantly. Safety first, Xiaoling Yu said indifferently. The Peacock Bright King and I have very little interaction. I don't think he will make things difficult for me. Let's not take a detour. Shingongbao thought for a while and said, "But the peacock Bright King's flat-feathered peacock has a bad temper. It loves to eat meat, especially monsters with high cultivation. We can't bring our mounts, so we can only walk." The black spot tiger nodded repeatedly. It seemed that it was very afraid of the peacock Bright King's peacock. Shingongbao then put away the black spot tiger, while Shaolin Yu invited the foodie into the spiritual beast pouch. The reason why Shaolin Yu invited it into the spiritual beast pouch instead of the chaos spectrum was that he did not want to attract Shingongbao's attention. Secondly, the foodie in the spiritual beast pouch could move at any time according to Shaolin Yu's thoughts. Then the two of them quietly flew over the large river, choosing to travel in the dense forest. They tightly restrained their breath, as if they were facing a great enemy. After traveling carefully for nearly a month, Shaolin Yu and Shingongbao did not dare to speed up, so they were still unable to walk out of the Peacock Bright King's territory. However, a month later, the two of them were suddenly covered by a golden light above their heads, and a gust of wind rolled down. The gust of wind was so powerful that even experts like Shaolin Yu and Shingongbao found it difficult to stabilize their bodies. The two of them raised their heads in shock, only to see a large bird with a huge figure. The bird was golden all over and looked very similar to a phoenix. However, it did not have the noble aura of a phoenix, nor was it as beautiful. However, it exuded a domineering and fierce aura. "Oh no, we've been discovered by the flat-feathered peacock." Shingongbao's expression changed drastically, but he did not rush to escape. Instead, he stood still. The mighty power from the sky had sealed off a large area of the surrounding space. Shaolin Yu was not an expert, so he could not escape even if he wanted to. If Shingongbao was not here, Shaolin Yu would have to immediately hide in the chaos spectrum. "Shingongbao, what are you trying to do by sneaking into the Wise King's territory like a thief?" The golden peacock hovered in the air and questioned in human language. Brother Kong, please don't misunderstand. We did not sneak in. We did not want to disturb the Wise King's cultivation, so we walked quietly. We have no other intentions." Shingongbao said with a dry smile, appearing very polite. Shingongbao was calling him a flat-feathered peacock just now, and now he was calling him Brother Kong. This Shingongbao was really a two-faced guy. "Humph. You unlucky star, swindling and deceiving people everywhere. This little brother looks kind but soft-hearted. He must have been deceived by you." The golden peacock replied rudely. Shingongbao was embarrassed by the peacock's words in front of Shaolin Yu. He did not know how many times he had scolded the peacock in his heart, but he still said politely, "Brother Kong, please don't misunderstand. I am a sincere friend of Brother Xiao. Why would I deceive him? Brother Kong, please don't listen to the gossip of others. I, Shingongbao, have always been a sincere person. If you want to be sincere, then there is no cultivator in this world who is not sincere." The peacock sneered again, and then said, "Since you are already in the Wise King's territory, it is very rude to not pay respects to the Wise King." Shingongbao replied, "I just don't want to disturb the Wise King's cultivation." The peacock laughed and said, "I am here on the Wise King's orders to invite the two of you to the Wise King Palace." Shingongbao was very surprised and asked, "What orders does the Wise King have for us?" "When you reach the Wise King Palace, the Wise King will tell you in detail." Chapter 700. Can we not go? Shaolin Yu asked. "Of course not. The Wise King has invited us. If we don't go, we might offend him. He is one of the top 10 cultivators on Tongtian Holy Island. We can't afford to offend him." Shingongbao shook his head and said, "Even if we don't go, the Wise King will come looking for us." Strange, why would he want to see us? Even though Shingongbao was reluctant, he still led the equally reluctant Shaolin Yu to the Wise King Hall. Shingongbao had been on Tongtian Holy Island for many years. Naturally, he knew where the Wise King Hall was. Moreover, they had already been exposed and were invited by the Wise King. Shingongbao and Shaolin Yu did not have to be careful. They traveled at full speed and arrived at the foot of a mountain in less than half a day. At the shining spot of the mountain, there was a tall and majestic hall. That was the Wise King Hall. A stone staircase that was about 10 feet wide extended from the entrance of the Wise King Hall to the foot of the mountain. Shingongbao and Xiaolingyu climbed up the staircase. They walked a total of 99,999 steps before they reached the entrance of the Wise King Hall. Beside the Wise King Hall was a tall sycamore tree. The golden peacock was perched on the crown of the sycamore tree. When the peacock saw Xiaolingyu, it said angrily, "Why are you walking so slowly? If the wise king gets impatient, you'll suffer." Shingongbao smiled bitterly and thought to himself, "No matter how fast I am, I can't beat a feathered beast like you." The door of the Wise King Hall was wide open. On both sides of the door, there was a stone statue of a ferocious man. If a child saw it, they might cry. Upon entering the Wise King Hall, the first thing they saw was a cultivator with 4 arms. He was a middle-aged cultivator with a solemn expression. The cultivator was taller than the average person. He sat on a white lotus platform. He wore a white monk's robe, a Buddhist crown on his head, and a golden circlet around his neck. His face was pale and full of benevolence. Shingongbao greets the wise king. Shingongbao immediately bowed. Xiaolingyu greets the wise king. Xiaolingyu could only follow suit and bow. Only then did the 4-armed Mingwang slowly open his eyes. With a deep voice, he said, "You don't have to be so courteous. Please sit." There were no seats in the hall, only 2 golden futons. Xiaolingyu and Shingongbao each chose a futon and sat down cross-legged. "Shingongbao," King Ming called out softly. "Yes." Shingongbao shuddered and replied. Although Shingongbao was also a divine master, he was not only far behind King Ming in terms of strength, but also in terms of cultivation base. The difference between the Master of Heaven-reaching realm could not only be judged by the ranks of early, middle, and late. After your master ascended, your senior brother Jiangshan went into seclusion. Do you know when he will come out? Mingwang asked. Mingwang, Shingongbao really doesn't know about this. You also know that I don't get along well with my senior brother. I never ask about his affairs, Shingongbao replied. Go back and check on your senior brother Jiangshan for me. If he comes out, I have something to discuss with him, King Ming ordered. Yes, Shingongbao replied. In fact, Shingongbao's master was much more powerful than the Peacock Bright King. He could be considered the Peacock Bright King's senior. Logically speaking, Shingongbao and the Peacock Bright King should be brothers. However, the difference in strength between the two was too great. Shingongbao was also a timid and cautious person, so he did not dare to show off his master in front of King Ming. On the other hand, the Peacock Bright King disdained Shingongbao's character, so he did not treat Shingongbao well. Young man, you're from Earth, right? Mingwang then looked at Xiaolingyu and asked in a rather amiable tone. Yes, Xiaolingyu replied calmly. Not only do I feel the aura of Earth's bloodline on you, but I also feel the aura of the Yellow Emperor's bloodline, as well as the bloodline of the True Dragon, Phoenix, Qilin, and other demon races. Moreover, you cultivate the chaotic force. It's a superior technique, but it has a demonic nature. There's also the aura of the evil race on you. I'm afraid you'll never reach the immortal realm if you continue to cultivate like this, King Ming said with some regret. Please give me some pointers, King Ming, Xiaolingyu said sincerely. However, Xiaolingyu did not understand where the aura of the evil race on him came from, and what kind of existence the evil race was. Your bloodline is mixed. Although it's a fusion of many high-level bloodlines, they can make you powerful temporarily. However, they will become your shackles when you try to reach the immortal realm in the future. To solve this problem, you only need to go to the Jade Pool at the top of the sacred mountain controlled by the sacred army to wash your body. King Ming stopped talking at this point. Shingongbao's heart skipped a beat. He thought to himself that King Ming's tone was really big. Going to the Jade Pool at the sacred mountain controlled by the sacred army to wash his body was not a treatment that ordinary people could enjoy. It was difficult for ordinary masters to even get close to the sacred mountain, let alone reach the top. Shaolin Yu only frowned slightly and made a mental note. However, the aura of the evil race on your body cannot be removed by external forces. You can only defeat it yourself, King Ming continued. May I ask, King Ming, where did the aura of the evil race on my body come from? Shaolin Yu asked with cupped fists. An evil spirit has invaded and tried to take over your body. King Ming continued to explain, it should be an extremely powerful evil spirit. When its body and soul were destroyed, it possessed your body. Now, the true spirit of the evil spirit has completely merged with your body and soul. Although it is in an invisible state, it will wake up one day and take over your destiny. Please teach me how to save it, King Ming, Shaolin Yu said with a bow. In Shaolin Yu's opinion, the aura of the evil spirit on his body should have been brought about by the heavenly eye of destruction. After all, he saw a huge shadow of a human at that time, and the heavenly eye of destruction did indeed have some evil aura and demonic nature. If you can't reach the immortal realm before the evil spirit awakens, you can only give up this body and use a wisp of your soul as a guide to take over someone else's body and cultivate again. If you can answer my question truthfully, I can give you a Buddha exorcism talisman to help you suppress the evil spirit and delay its awakening, King Ming replied. Buddha exorcism talisman. Shingongbao immediately widened his eyes and looked at Shaolin Yu with envy. Please ask, King Ming, Shaolin Yu said calmly. Do you know what kind of heavenly eye theurgy you have? King Ming asked. I think it's the heavenly eye of destruction, Shaolin Yu replied. So it's the heavenly eye of destruction. King Ming's expressionless face revealed a hint of disappointment. After pondering for a moment, King Ming waved his hand, and a golden talisman filled with Sanskrit runes slowly flew toward Shaolin Yu and sank into Shaolin Yu's body in an instant. What made Shaolin Yu feel strange was that although the Buddha exorcism talisman was already in his body, he couldn't feel it at all and couldn't find it. I hope you can reach the immortal realm before the evil spirit awakens. Otherwise, this Tongtian sacred island and the entire realm of the gods, I'm afraid. King Ming didn't finish his sentence and waved his hand. I won't see you off. Shingongbao felt like he was sitting on pins and needles when he came to King Ming's hall. Naturally, he stood up immediately and said that he didn't dare to trouble King Ming to see him off as he left with Shaolin Yu. After Shaolin Yu and Shingongbao left King Ming's hall together, King Ming frowned and sighed. The evil spirit is already heaven-defying and has extraordinary strength. If it's supplemented by the heavenly eye of destruction, who below the immortal realm can compete with it? After leaving King Ming's hall, Shingongbao brought Shaolin Yu along as they traveled. Their speed became faster and faster, as if they were fleeing for their lives. After traveling at full speed for an entire month, Shingongbao finally stopped, panting. He then circled Shaolin Yu a few times and said, Brother Shao, you're also hiding your strength. Shaolin Yu only laughed bitterly and said, Didn't you hear King Ming say that my situation is very bad? Shingongbao didn't take it to heart and said, These guys like to exaggerate to show their foresight and wisdom. There are many things that need to be open-minded about and take one step at a time. What's the point of thinking so much all the time? They all stay in their own homes every day, so naturally, they'll have a lot of unfathomable thoughts. Hearing Shingongbao's words, Shaolin Yu felt much better. During the month that Shingongbao brought him along, Shaolin Yu was very worried. King Ming's words really scared him. How many years does it take for a normal cultivator to go from the early stage of the heavenly arrival realm to the immortal realm? Shaolin Yu suddenly asked. I'm not sure, but I know a powerful person who only took a few billion years to go from the early stage of the heavenly arrival realm to the immortal realm, Shingongbao replied. A few billion years, I don't know if the Buddha exorcism charm can last that long, Shaolin Yu said gloomily. Don't worry. The Buddha exorcism charm is the first Buddhist charm that Buddha personally refined. It's very powerful. Shingongbao comforted. At this time, Shingongbao had already made up his mind. After stealing the holy laurel fruit, he would immediately separate from Shaolin Yu. He felt that Shaolin Yu would bring him trouble. After a few more months, Shingongbao brought Shaolin Yu to the vicinity of the Moon Mountain. The shape of the Moon Mountain was very strange. At least, it was the first time that Shaolin Yu had seen such a mountain. The lower half of the Moon Mountain was considered normal. It was not much different from a normal mountain, but the upper half was more like an incomparably huge ball. The incomparably huge ball was constantly emitting fluorescent light. At night, the fluorescent light would be very dazzling, as if a full moon was hanging high in the sky. This was because the lower half of the Moon Mountain did not emit fluorescent light. Looking from afar, there were many jade palaces built on the Moon Mountain. White clouds floated past, and birds flapped their wings and soared among them. It gave people a dreamy feeling. The holy laurel tree is at the top of the mountain. It's easy to find. I'll go install that woman first. You have to be careful. If you can pick a few more, don't hesitate because this may be your only chance. After Shingongbao reminded her, he rode on his black-spotted tiger and swaggered toward the Moon Mountain according to the previous plan. Happy Mid-Autumn Festival, everyone! The whole family was happy and healthy. On the last day of the month, don't hide your gold medals. They're expired. Chapter 701. Watching Shingongbao gradually disappear into the distance, Shaolin Yu fell into deep thought. Shaolin Yu was certain that since Shingongbao dared to go to Moon Mountain, he must be confident that he was absolutely safe. It seemed that Shingongbao and the owner of Moon Mountain had some friendship. If they were friends, he should be able to stall for some time. Shaolin Yu was almost certain that the beautiful woman was not the only expert on Moon Mountain. There would be no obstacles on his way to the top. Hiding as much as possible to get close to the laurel tree was only one aspect. Even if he finally got the laurel fruit, he had to be able to take it away. The laurel tree was an important existence. Even if it was easy to find, there would be powerful restrictions or formations around it. After plucking the laurel fruit, there would be an immediate unforeseen event. Stealing the fruit and escaping were both very important. On the way, Shingongbao kept emphasizing that stealing the fruit was not too dangerous and not too difficult. Naturally, he would not tell Shaolin Yu about the possible dangers on Moon Mountain. After thinking seriously, Shaolin Yu began to form hand seals, and all the seals were placed on his body. Gradually, his body was enveloped by a dense fog. After a few moments, the fog gradually dissipated, and Shaolin Yu's position was empty. Shaolin Yu had used an invisibility restriction, which was left behind by the ancient era's expert, Liao Zhou. Because it was the first time he used it, Shaolin Yu was not sure whether he would be discovered by the experts in the heaven-reaching realm. He could only be sure that no saint god cultivator would be able to detect him unless he was too close to the other party. After becoming invisible, Shaolin Yu went to Moon Mountain. Moon Mountain was huge. Although its shape was strange, there were a few stone steps that extended to the top. There were no powerful formations or restrictions on these stone steps. Shaolin Yu walked up the steps. Along the way, he saw many beautiful female cultivators, but these female cultivators were at most in the saint god stage and could not detect Shaolin Yu's existence. To Shaolin Yu's surprise, he really went all the way to the top of the mountain. However, as soon as he reached the top of the mountain, he had already sensed that a very powerful divine sense swept over him. Shaolin Yu did not even think about it as he directly hid inside the primal chaos spectrum. In a pavilion on Moon Mountain, Shingongbao was playing chess with an average-looking but strong man. Beside them, a beautiful woman was watching the game. The woman was dressed in a palace robe. Her figure was graceful, and her hair fluttered in the wind. Her facial features were beautiful to the extreme. Not only was her appearance impeccable, but she also had a noble and otherworldly temperament. Anyone who looked at her would be fascinated and would not dare to have the slightest blasphemy. In the woman's arms was holding a snow-white rabbit. The rabbit squinted its eyes, looking lazy and adorable. "Hoi, I haven't seen you for many years. Your chess skills are still so bad," Shingongbao said proudly, having gained a slight advantage in the game. "You don't seem to have improved either," the man said with a frown. I really don't understand. Both of you are terrible chess players, but you are playing chess in my moon palace. It's so annoying, the woman said with a bored face. I heard that Hui is learning chess in the moon palace every day. I came here specially to ask for advice. In terms of martial arts, I am far inferior to Hui. I can only find some comfort in chess, Shen Gongbao explained. That's true. Hui has also learned the way of domination for a long time. Unfortunately, he is not in the right state today. Especially just now, when he clearly had the advantage, he made a bad move, causing the situation to become passive, the woman said. Ha, Hui is not focused. You can't be distracted when playing chess. You have to concentrate fully, Shen Gongbao said with a smile. If you are not focused, not only will you not respect your opponent, but you will also be indecisive. This is the biggest taboo in chess, the woman said with a little dissatisfaction. She seemed to be very unwilling to see Hui lose to Shen Gongbao. It's not that I'm not focused, but just now I felt that someone seemed to have sneaked up to the top of the mountain, so I was distracted to check it out. Hui shook his head and explained. Hearing this, Shen Gongbao was shocked, but his face did not show any abnormality. Someone sneaked up to the top of the mountain? The woman frowned and asked again, Did you find anything? Hui shook his head gloomily and said, I didn't find anything. Just now, I felt something unusual, but now there is nothing. Ha, Hui, I think you are going to lose and want to find an excuse for yourself, Shen Gongbao said with a laugh. Hearing this, Hui's face became slightly sullen. You can play chess here at ease. You must beat him. I will go to the top of the mountain to take a closer look. After saying this, the woman floated away. Shen Gongbao and Hui naturally continued to play chess. Hui, who was focused on the game, tried his best, but he made a mistake just now and lost the game. The woman also came back from the top of the mountain. Seeing that Hui had lost, she was very disappointed and dissatisfied. She said, There is nothing unusual at the top of the mountain. Your chess skills have deteriorated, but has your cultivation realm also deteriorated? Hui was a little ashamed. In order to save face, he naturally asked to play another game with Shen Gongbao. Shen Gongbao had a plan in mind, so of course, he would not refuse. But before they started, he said, Don't lose again, or your wife will make you sleep on the stone outside. Seeing that his wife was really unhappy, Hui took a deep breath and said, Shen Gongbao, you will definitely lose this game. Shaoling Yu, who had already reached the top of the mountain, hid for 2 hours before coming out of the chaotic spectrum. He did not feel any strong divine thoughts, so he made his invisible body and walked toward a big tree with dense branches and leaves not far away. When he was 100 feet away from the big tree, Shaoling Yu had already felt that there was a hidden restriction and formation in front of him, so he stopped. Fortunately, Shaoling Yu had digested the inheritance of Liao Zhou before. Otherwise, he would not have been able to sense the high-level restriction and formation here. But it was one thing to sense it, but it was another to be able to break it or ignore it. Since the laurel tree was so important, the restriction and formation set up around it must be very powerful. Even if Shaoling Yu tried to attack it, he would not be able to break it in a short time unless he used the Destruction Heavenly Eye. But if he used the Destruction Heavenly Eye, he was afraid that the laurel tree would be destroyed. Since Shaoling Yu was here, he naturally thought of this and had a way to deal with it. Attacking it forcefully was absolutely impossible. Although Shaoling Yu had his own way, he had to complete it in the shortest time possible. After hesitating for a moment, Shaoling Yu went back into the chaotic spectrum. Then, he took out the divine artifact, the yin-yang mirror, and released 4 virtual monsters. He brought the 4 virtual monsters out of the chaotic spectrum and ordered them to rush toward the laurel tree. The 4 virtual monsters were not afraid of any attacks, so naturally, they were not afraid of the formation and restriction attacks. Moreover, their bodies were virtual, so the restriction and formation could not stop them. Just as the 4 virtual monsters entered the formation and restriction, Hui, who was playing chess with Shen Gongbao, immediately changed his expression and shouted, "Oh no! It's indeed not good. You might lose this game again." The woman looked displeased. Hui had already stood up. He was about to move when Shingongbao grabbed his arm. Hui, why are you so flustered when you're playing chess? How can you win with such a state of mind? Shingongbao sighed. It was also at this moment that the 4 virtual monsters had already rushed to the laurel tree's side and each went to pick the sacred laurel fruits. There's a situation at the laurel tree. Hui shouted in a low voice. He shook off Shingongbao's pull and then flew into the sky. While flying, an ancient bow appeared in Hui's hand and he shot out 4 rainbow-like arrows in succession. The 4 arrows hit the 4 virtual monsters very accurately in an instant. However, to Hui's surprise, the arrows that could blow up a planet and kill an expert in the immortal ascension realm actually passed through them without causing any damage to the 4 virtual monsters. Hui's archery skills were superb. Although he shot out 4 arrows in a hurry, each arrow was sure to hit the target without hurting the laurel tree. After each of them plucked a sacred laurel fruit, the 4 virtual monsters immediately turned around and approached Xiaolingyu, who was outside the formation. Xiaolingyu was still invisible at the moment, but he soon felt that he had been locked on by a powerful divine sense. The danger alarm immediately sounded. At this time, Xiaolingyu could not hide in the chaotic spectrum because he could not control the chaotic spectrum to move in the chaotic spectrum, nor could he make the chaotic spectrum to collect things outside. In other words, if he entered the chaotic spectrum, the 4 virtual monsters would be left outside. He had to let the primal chaos scroll take in the 4 phantom monsters from the outside before he went in himself. Just as Xiaolingyu was hesitating, another arrow, locked on by a strand of divine sense, shot towards him at high speed. This arrow could not be dodged at all. With a thought, Xiaolingyu's seat-shaped magic treasure appeared out of thin air and blocked in front of him. Boom! The rapidly approaching arrow did not have time to change direction and directly hit the magic treasure. The 2 exploded with a deafening sound, causing the entire Moon Mountain to shake violently for a while. Xiaolingyu had just sent the 4 virtual monsters into the chaotic spectrum. Before he could rejoice that he had blocked the fatal arrow, another arrow flew at him. He made up his mind and the vertical eye between his brows suddenly opened. A destructive red light whizzed out and met the rainbow-like arrow. Another explosion sounded, and the arrow was destroyed by the destructive red light. Xiaolingyu's reaction speed wasn't slow as well. He immediately put the chair-shaped magic treasure back into his body. However, he was just about to enter the primal chaos catalog to hide when he noticed to his astonishment that the space around him had suddenly frozen, and he was actually unable to move at all. The entire space was completely frozen. And the power of this ice seal was who knew how many times stronger than Lil Bing's ice seal domain. It actually made the primal chaos spectrum unable to suck Xiaolingyu in. Xiaolingyu tried his best to stimulate his skills in chaotic primordial fire, but he could not break the ice. You're tuning into the Mythic Realms YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.